Aurora Audiobooks presents an unabridged recording of Small Mercies, written by Richard Anderson and read by Nicholas Osmond. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Aurora. Chapter 1. Dimple helped 3027 to her feet. The cow was too heavy for him to lift, but if he held the base of her tail, he could steady her as her weak legs wobbled and found their place. Alongside, her tan, soft-eyed calf probed impatiently, nudging the flank, his tongue like a long, flat, rippling leech, survival its only agenda. There was a bloke on the ute radio saying confidently that drought could be a good thing because it removed the bottom rung of farmers. Wally friggin' Oliver, Dimple muttered to the cow. Trust an Oliver to insist on survival of the fittest. The cow lowed softly as her calf suckled. Reflex or instinct demanded she stay still while her calf drank. Her health bade she was capable of nothing more. The scene pleased Dimple. At least cow and calf would survive. The birth had been assisted by Dimple and Ruthie, and it had been pretty rough. The calf had been big inside her, had presented with one front leg tucked backwards, and the cow was low on energy. In another year, she would have kept pushing, walking, getting up and down, until she convinced the calf to slide into the world. In this season, all she could manage was to push the muzzle and one front foot out. He'd found her sitting on the paddock, the hair on her shoulder and hip bone rubbed off from thrashing around, trying to give birth in between attempting to get up. They'd pulled the calf in the paddock, but it had taken 5 days for the cow to be able to push herself up onto her feet on her own. For the 5 days, they had lifted her up with the tractor. They'd helped cows plenty of times before, not always with this amount of success. Some cows had a fatalistic tipping point. After being down for a couple of days, they gave up. One day of give up took away their options. They didn't eat enough, and then they couldn't eat enough. They became too weak to stand, and then too weak to sit up. Dimple didn't let them get to that last stage, and he had to stop himself from hating them for their obstinacy, as if he expected them to acknowledge his labours and to try harder. Wally Oliver was now saying farmers were business people making business decisions. The pictures in the media of people in desperate straits shooting their beloved animals were not a fair representation of the industry. The insinuation, barely disguised, was that the struggling farmers were losers and should be treated as such. Losers by definition, Dimple informed the calf. They've lost fucking everything. But Wally Oliver was right. Farming was a business, a cutthroat business masquerading as a community project. 3027 and her calf would be sold when they were well enough. That was a business decision, like selling all the others had been. It meant he and Ruthie had money in the bank, which stopped the bank manager's monthly email asking when the interest and the agreed amount of the principal would be paid. But it wasn't real money, except to the bank. It wasn't money he and Ruthie could spend, because if they did, they would never be able to buy cows back, which meant they would never have enough income, which meant they would cease to exist. Who would employ a bloke in his 50s who had worked for himself all his life? He didn't fancy working for another farmer, but that was probably what he'd end up doing. He kept his grip on the cow, not yet confident that she was ready to stand on her own. Ruthie arrived with a bucket of water. 3027 pushed her muzzle into it and slurped like the pet she was not. 3027 had the kind of soft nature you wanted to build a herd around. That was not going to happen. Not here, anyway. The cow had accepted their offerings of water, hay and cottonseed as if she understood they were trying to help her. Often as not, cows didn't. They took feed and water, but begrudgingly, certain the humans could not be completely trusted. They weren't wrong, but death awaited every living thing. There was no way around that. "Don't you get sick of being a good woman?" he said, watching Ruthie turn and head back to the tap for more water. The cow should have been able to get to the trough on her own, but Ruthie wasn't taking any chances. Dimple saw his wife smile in that tight way that meant restricted pleasure. She looked back at him. "Is that one of your trick questions?" "No." He let go of the tail. "Don't you ever think, stuff it. I'm staying in bed today. I'm going to drink tea and flip through magazines, eat a box of chocolates, waste the day messaging the boys, my friends, my sister." She shook her head at him and bent down to turn the tap on. Posing difficult questions and phrasing them as a joke was a game of Dimple's that she didn't always find amusing. Or maybe take up with Fergus bank balance and spend the rest of your days doing whatever you wanted to do, travelling, redesigning his garden, holding soirees. We only get one go-around after all. Go away. She took the bucket and offered it to the cow again. The calf took a break, and 3027 drank again, making sure they would continue to be amazed how much one cow could drink. Finished, the cow swayed and stepped forward, her legs holding, but only just. Dimple reached down, picked up a length of baling twine and wrapped it in on itself. He walked with Ruthie towards the ute. "I mean, sure, you'd have to put up with him, but all your money troubles would be solved. There'd be holidays, nice clothes, and a big house. You might even help the kids out with a bit of cash. And old age wouldn't be a problem. Retirement would be a breeze." He saw the bucket swaying in her slim brown fingers. Ruthie relented. "Yeah, he does have his charm." She might as well play along. It was a game too dangerous to be taken seriously. Dimple laughed quietly, and so did she. Fergus Banner was a friend, of sorts, one of the few divorced men in the district. The departure of his wife, Helen, for the city hadn't appeared to put a dent in his confidence, his wealth, or his lifestyle. Hence Dimple's privately held nickname of Bank Balance. At local parties, with the help of alcohol, Fergus always paid special attention to Ruthie. He never overstepped the mark, but Dimple had a sense he was ready to, the minute the signals were right. Dimple didn't know what he could do about it. If Ruthie took up with someone like Fergus, it would have been a decision long in the making. It would be too late to fight for her. As they drove down the paddock to check tanks and troughs before he took her back to the house, he didn't look at her, because he knew she would ask, "What?" But he thought how she must have at least fantasized about running away with Fergus or someone like him. The kids were grown up. She'd given their marriage a fair crack. Why keep bashing away at it? If you are capable of acknowledging that you only live once, then you have to at least consider an easier option, don't you? "I've never considered jumping ship, even when you've been at your most painful." "I didn't say a word." "Yeah, but I know you. I know what you're thinking." A pause. Just the low rumble of the ute, the radio turned off. "I have imagined living on my own, taking a house somewhere, getting a job a couple of days a week, having a little garden, coffee dates and walking groups, maybe going to the theatre or an art gallery in the middle of the day, spending time with the kids, suiting myself, basically." "Sounds nice. You want to check that tank for me?" Ruthie got out and climbed up the small ladder while he sat in the ute with the motor running. The float gauge had been stuck on empty for years. She came straight back, got in and said, "It's full." Great. At least they still had water. "So, why didn't you move to your little house?" "I'm still working on it." "The old animal magnetism, eh? You can't drag yourself away from me." She shook her head again. There was only so much of his nonsense she could put up with. He didn't need to look across at her to know she was as beautiful as she had ever been. A ludicrous assertion, but he knew it was true. There were wrinkles and the undeniable wear of gravity, but still. When he married her, she was beautiful for a 22-year-old. But that kind of beauty didn't relate to what she was now. Even beauty had context. "I'm not going to have sex tonight." What? I'm too tired. I'm exhausted. I just want to sleep. She had been black-haired and brown-skinned, and she was still that. When they started going out, he couldn't believe his luck. When she agreed to marry him, he was certain someone would come along and point out, "This is absurd. You cannot marry this bloke. He's nowhere near your standard." And they would have been right. He knew his mates felt the same way about their wives, or at least they used to. Fair enough. Oh, come on. You had that look. I know that look. You were probably thinking about an old girlfriend, were you? Ginny, what was her name? Is that why you were asking me about changing midstream? No. Don't be ridiculous. You were thinking about doing it with someone else. That's why the joke's about Fergus. You're a sicko, like all men. I was actually thinking about how beautiful you are. She smiled thinly and looked out the window. I told you. I'm just too tired. The truth was, so was he. He couldn't wait for that time of day when he could go to bed and forget about everything for a while. Sometimes it made him want to go to bed at 8 o'clock. Did you hear that guy on the radio? Talking about drought being a good way to get rid of failing farmers? Yes. People are killing themselves. Men mostly. Men who are only too aware they are failing. When did this happen? When did farmers decide to turn against each other? He's probably right, though. So what? He would have been right in the last big drought, and the flood before that, and the cyclone before that. No one said it then. No one thought it necessary to rub it in. It's awful. She was suddenly fully steamed. I mean, what does he get out of it? Are we supposed to be impressed with how terrific he is? Are we supposed to be thankful that he has enhanced the image of farming by being a dickhead? Like Dad used to say, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, is usually said by someone standing next to the fridge with the freezer door open. It cracked her open, and she laughed, tossing her head back, arching her throat. It was something he loved to see. I don't remember your dad saying that. No, I made it up. It's true, though. The guy talking was young Wally Oliver. His family operation is large enough to ride out 3 droughts, so he feels safe enough to speak up. Irrigation people. Well, I think it's really shitty. They stopped at a gate, and she got out to open it. The paddock was dry, flat and featureless. Only the clumps of trees in the corner broke the eye line. He drove through, and she shut the gate. We ought to go and see him, he said, as she clambered back in. What? Let's go and see Wally Oliver and tell him he's a dickhead, to his face. The idea gave her sudden pleasure. That would be fun. I'm serious. No, you're not, and neither am I. What would he care what people like us said anyway? Better than attacking him on social media or something. It would reach more people. She stopped herself, a deliberate action he knew well. I don't want to do any of this. He's entitled to his opinion. I just wish he didn't feel the need to express it on the radio. It'll hurt a lot of people. Good people. They drove over the ramp to the house. The garden was green in places where she watered it, a luxury they were almost ashamed of. Almost. He dropped her at the back door, knowing she would not sit still for a moment. She would make dinner, check the accounts, garden, and clean the house, all in the time it took him to bring a load of hay up from the bottom shed. He was sure some farm women spent their spare time watching movies, daydreaming and reading romances, but not Ruthie, or Ruthie's friends for that matter. The only time she was not doing something useful was when she was asleep. And she didn't sleep much. There was always something to keep her awake, not least the accounts. He drove to the hayshed, parked the ute, and fired up the little lorry that waited in the awning of the shed and drove it round to the front of the hayshed. Then he started the tractor that was kept in the shed and loaded the lorry with 6 big bales for the coming days. When they were stacked neatly, he put the tractor back in its dusty place and drove the loaded lorry to the cattle yards. He parked it in a holding yard where the cows couldn't get to it, and then walked the 1.5 kilometres back to the hay shed in his ute. The dogs, Ringer and One Eye, came with him, hoping he would provide more action than the trip back and forth from the hay shed. But they respected routine and were glad to be in his company, no matter how uneventful. In the east, 2 ravens that everyone called crows circled and landed heavily, guided by their special magic. They knew within minutes when an animal was dead. They knew when ewes were lambing. They knew when the chooks had laid their eggs. This time, they didn't seem to have anything on the ground. Somewhere, something was dead. He didn't bother to count how many bales were still in the shed. He knew the number, and it was small. Another load was coming. It was supposed to be here, but trucks were in demand, and as Liam, the owner of the trucks Dimple used, had told him, he had to wait like everyone else. He had known Liam would say that, and he also knew hay was scarce, so he had put in his order some time ago. Liam would be only profiteering a little bit, much less than other trucking companies. The hay guy would be profiteering a lot, but a bit less than the other guys, so it was a matter of accepting your chosen evils. In the meantime, the media were reporting that some of the drought charities receiving the goodwill of city people might not be as pure of heart as everyone expected. People love to romanticize about communities pulling together when a crisis hit. Not everyone caves into altruism, he said to no one. Dimple was calm. He had always assumed the worst outcome was the most likely one, so he was at least a little prepared for this long, dry spell. But this approach meant that, over time, he had not made as much money as he could have. He had never held on to his grain in the hope of receiving a forecast high price. He didn't put in the huge legume crop that everyone else did and made a fortune on, because he never believed the price would hold or that there would be enough rain, and so on. Now, after a lifetime, he had finally been right. He'd sold a good proportion of his cows when prices were high, back when everyone thought they were just having a dry season. "What if it rains this month?" they'd asked him. "You'll have done your money and you won't be able to afford to buy back in." It hadn't rained in that month, or the month since. "Bravo," he said softly. His long-delayed brilliance wasn't helping much. He and Ruthie still had to live on something and pay the overheads, as well as find the money to buy the hay for the few remaining cows. Cows that would not remain for much longer. But they would have enough money to sow a crop if it rained enough. They were still in the best financial shape they could be under the circumstances. Ridiculous, unprecedented, climate-fucked-up circumstances. The weather forecast on his phone offered false hope. He checked it so often he could almost predict when they would downgrade a significant weather event to scattered showers. They usually weren't scattered in his direction. Now he drove towards the house, looking up to the slight rise on his right, broken up by the fingers of a soon-to-set sun. He saw a dark shape on the crest of the rise above the peak of a contour bank. Dimple had looked at this country every day for so many years that a slight change in the lines of the landscape stood out like a statement. In this case, the statement was most likely a cow on her side, no doubt in distress. Cattle did not lie down on their side for long periods. A snooze, maybe, an afternoon nap, a camp before coming rain, but never more than that if they were healthy. He swung the ute around and headed towards the dark object. He stopped close and got out. There was no reaction from the cow. She was on her side, her eye already bloody and pecked by crows, her stomach not yet distended. If she was dead, it hadn't been for long. For one moment, his chest lifted, and a sob shook it. He pushed it back down. Was the sob for her or himself? Neither was a good response. How had he missed seeing her? He scanned this country every day, There was no long grass to hide her, nothing to conceal her, in fact, except a few rocks. Against reason, he knelt to put his hands under her head and push his knee behind her neck so the cow could push against him and right herself. But there was no point. She was not breathing, not seeing, and it was stupid to keep pretending that she was. He stood back and brushed down his hands. There was little sign of struggle. Perhaps she'd had some sort of heart failure and simply lain down and died. The words in his head made it sound like some sort of gift. It was spring, so only a few flies had gathered with their faultless timing. He took a moment to stand and take in the awfulness of death, the brutal, fleshy fact of it. He had not looked into his father's coffin because he knew what there was to see. It was only when he reached into the cab to retrieve a rope to tow the carcass away that he thought of the money her loss represented. Over $2,000 at the top of the market. $1,000 now, if she'd been in reasonable nick. Less if she hadn't. Unsaleable if she had been too skinny. But the money was abstract, as it always was. It only meant something when you turned it into something else. There was nothing abstract about the animal on its side in front of him, starting to leak pink, mucousy fluids. And, of course, he knew her. There were too few cows left for him not to know her. An Angus cross with a fine coat and a neat udder, who always produced one of the better calves. She was a good servant, never the rogue, never the fence jumper, never one to kick you or rush you in the yards. He understood, as he attached the rope to her leg, that only part of his grief was for himself. The rest of it was for his sense of her years of service, and the fact that he had not been able to treat her better, not seen her when she first went down, not noticed that she might have been susceptible to whatever it was that killed her. He dragged the body behind the ute to the gully and the small pile of other bodies. Sheep he'd killed for meat, and a fox that prowled the chook yard, ashamed of the indignity he was imposing on his cow. He could not help but remember photos and movies of Belsen and Auschwitz when he pulled her onto the pile, but he knew from experience that it was important to shake off morose thoughts, because they could take you like addiction did. It was just a cow. This was a drought. It happened. Enough. He drove back to the house thinking of the jobs he should have been doing, but refusing to do them. Ruthie would be distressed by the loss of a cow, and critical of him for not having found her earlier. Chapter 2. She opened the letter that wasn't a bill. She knew what it was. Beneath the letterhead, the result of the biopsy told the story. It was banal and terrifying. A cancerous lump under her left breast. People, friends, got cancer every day and survived it all the time. The doctors had caught it early, so her chances were good. The doctor had recommended an operation and follow-up radiation. The surgery had been unable to contact her. Everyday stuff. It still terrified her. At the window, a mudlark cheep screeched and probably pooped on the outdoor chairs. The house was cool. It was too early in spring for it to have heated up. Even in summer, the green of the garden stopped most of the reflected heat from the hard, bright paddocks entering the house. She had become a person who appreciated small luxuries. Before she married Dimple, a lifetime ago, she had been carefree with money, had spent it easily because she couldn't see what the fuss was about and who would bother taking it so seriously. She didn't even know she was spoilt. But now, even though she complained about never having enough money, she hated to waste it. Even when Dimple encouraged her to buy nice clothes or things for the house, she balked. She always found a discount or something that could get her through. A voice that had grown like a schoolmarm inside her told her that spare money should go to the boys, that they needed a hand to get ahead. This wasn't true, though. Her children lived better lives than she did. had travelled much more, went out more, experienced much more. But still, she would probably heed the voice. And they did not need to know about this cancer. For the moment, no one needed to know. At least it made life seem precious. She hadn't felt that in a while. In the last few years, her life had felt more like a sentence to be served. Her life was a drudgery with few highlights. The boys always. But she didn't see them much because they were no longer kids. Dimple, sometimes, because he was at least a good soul. The animals and the plants she'd saved in the garden. Her friends. If she thought about them now, as she stood in the kitchen reading the piece of mail, she saw that all of them deserved better from her. She had turned down invitations lately, outings to coffee and shops and shopping, requests to come for a wine at 6, just the girls. Everything cost money, even drinks at a friend's place, because you had to take something, a dish or a bottle of wine you wouldn't have had at home. But money wasn't much help when you were dead. She would survive the cancer, and she would stop saying no to things. She would tell Dimple she loved him, and maybe even show it. No, he could work that out for himself. She would visit Finney and Jay more, whether they wanted her to or not. She placed the letter in a folder in the office, a place Dimple would never look. She needed time to process what she'd just learned. He knew she'd had the biopsy taken and was awaiting the results, but she would tell him when she was ready. Or not. Perhaps she would ignore the whole thing. Call the doctor's bluff. They weren't always right. She checked the defrosted steak in the fridge they would have for dinner, a salad to go with it, potatoes. That would be enough. But she was not that person. The statistics on surviving breast cancer were undeniable. If she did nothing, she would die. If she acted, she would most probably live, maybe even for a long time. So she would tell Dimple and get herself organised to go into town for the operation and then the treatment. But she would give it a day or two. 2 days wouldn't matter. What if they opened her up and it was much worse than they thought? Metastasized. Was that the word? And what if they told her she only had months to live? Let's have 2 days, she said out loud, but not loud. The kettle and the sink and the white cupboards and the pale blue jug and the porcelain salt and pepper shakers and the timber stools paying her no mind. She must have spent a lot of time standing, daydreaming in the kitchen. Maybe 2 hours if that was possible. Because now she could hear Dimple arriving, getting out of the ute, saying something to the dogs, and finding his way to the back door. Hi. He pushed through the door. There was hay on his shoulders, and she was going to order him straight back outside, but instead said, Hi. She walked over to him, held his thick shoulder, and guided him back through the screen door, where she began to dust him off. There were strands of straw in his hair, too. Thick, curly hair, only tentatively giving in to grey. She wanted to stroke it, but did not. It would have been a very strange thing to do. He grinned. Caught me out. I was having a roll in the hay. Woohoo! She didn't respond, and knew he didn't expect her to. When they were inside, he told her about the dead cow. How can she have just died like that, without you seeing her? Is there some other sort of disease in the remaining cows, like botulism or something? He wanted to tell her that she had to accept the death, but he also knew she was right to ask the question. I don't think so. One cow is only one cow. She stood at the oven, breathing heavily through her nose, tapping a spatula on the cooktop. She turned to him. Should we sell the rest of them as soon as possible? There was panic there, and he knew why. What if their remaining cows died? The loss, the money, the pain, the shame. You couldn't stop yourself asking the worst. What if the drought is only beginning? What if it never rains properly again? What if our animals all die? And so on. It's just one cow at the moment. We lose animals even in a good year. And in a bad year like this, they eat stuff they normally wouldn't. Their immunity gets down, I know. But if it happens again... Do you want me to arrange a truck? The cows can all be gone by next week. The prices aren't that bad. They'll only get worse if we don't get a break. Don't tell me things I know. And no, I don't want to sell the rest of the cows, but I need you to be on top of it. So do I. Then, as if it were the logical follow-on, she said, I'd like to go and see him. Who? He was distracted. There was no one he wanted to go and see. Wally Oliver. The dick on the radio. He looked at her face and squeezed his eyebrows together. Why? To let him know that he's playing with people's lives. Really? Really? We could phone him. No, I mean it, face to face. But like you said, why would he listen to people like us anyway? Doesn't matter. I'll feel better. Dimple was quiet. This was not the sort of thing Ruthie normally did. But what Ruthie did wasn't always normal, and when she set her mind to something, it was a big ship to turn around. How do we find the time? We go for one night, visit him in the afternoon, stay in a motel somewhere, then come home. Feed up before we leave, and after when we return. She had not thought this out. The plan formed with the delivery of each word. He leant back against the kitchen bench and chewed at his cheek. So, when are we doing this? As soon as 3027 is strong enough for us to leave her. Right. He folded his arms. I don't think it's a good idea. He'll probably tell us to piss off. We'll drive for hours just to be told off. Well, then consider it a night away. A break for our mental health. She watched him breathe deeply. He had already conceded, but wasn't ready to admit it. He lives near Willie. I don't think there's even a Chinese restaurant in Willie. I'll pack you an overnight bag. If we leave at 8, we should get to his place around midday, and we might catch him at lunch. He might not even be around. The whole trip will be a waste of time. Do it for me. I could do with a drive. He'd put up enough of a fight. He slapped his hands on his thighs. All right. If he punches me, I'm blaming you. She put a hand back on his shoulder. Thanks. He disappeared to shower and change. She had expected him to link her desire for the trip to something that was making her feel bad, and to guess that her results had arrived. It was a relief to remember he was only intermittently capable of that level of sensitivity. She turned the TV on, but didn't listen to its stories. The hum of words and flash of colour were enough. Her mother had died of a stroke. Multiple strokes, about the time she was due to be admitted for care. Lucky her. Her mother would have been very unhappy in a residential facility because she had decided she hated them. Her mother's decisions were not negotiable. Dimple said the same of hers. She smiled at the thought. There was nobody in the world like her mother. Pig-headed and kind-hearted. Outspoken, but self-aware. Pushy and demanding, as well as caring. It was impossible to stop missing her. Her death had made Ruthie's father seem like a washed-out version of something he might have been. The energy and commitment needed to battle with his wife day in and day out had already failed him by the time Ruthie was a teenager. He withdrew into his work, and then his shed, his share portfolio, and his golf. As a young woman, she had thought of him as cowardly. He never challenged her mother. She got her way in everything, no matter how ridiculous. Later, Ruthie realised that withdrawing was her father's only option if he wanted to stay married. Her mother was incapable of ever backing down or seeing any reason to do so, and was prepared to die on every hill, every day, and in between remind everyone of the injustices she'd suffered. These days he probably would have left her when the children were grown and gone off to find someone young and pretty and eventually just as obstinate as Ruthie's mother. She searched for restaurants in Willie. There was one, a Chinese, the Golden Empress. Every country town had one. Always had. How extraordinary were those early Chinese pioneers. Didn't speak the language, didn't know the culture, and were as far from home as the moon is now. Mr. Oliver would probably have considered them too labour-intensive, un-Australian, too small-scale and not profitable enough. But they endured. The Golden Empress advertised being open all day, every day. In the shower, Dimple soaped the smell of death off his hands and then rubbed at the grease on his arms with his thick fingers. Had Ruthie received the results from the doctor? It seemed likely. The sudden need to visit Wally Oliver suggested it was so. The fact that she hadn't told him was surprising, but he knew she would have her reasons and would tell him in her own good time. He got out and toweled down. In the mirror, his chest was white and his neck and arms red-brown. But he wasn't looking. Mirrors held little interest for him. He was confident his wife would tell him anything he needed to know about his appearance. He thought about what he might say to Wally Oliver. Ask him if he knew what he was saying. Did he think it was fair to wipe people off the map with a few smart-ass observations? Should he punch him in the nose and be done with it? Ruthie would hate that. He put his clothes on, shirt and shorts, and considered what a poor prognosis might mean. They were pretty good with breast cancer these days. It might need an operation, perhaps. Treatment. But not life-threatening, surely. He wasn't going to Google it again. Ruthie would know everything that needed to be known. He didn't want them mucking around with her breasts. But on the scale of things he didn't want, it was pretty low. He didn't want her to be sick or die. He didn't want her to have discomfort, even as she was as tough as anyone he knew with that sort of thing. Why hadn't she told him? He hung the towel up, straightened it, and then did his best to make the rest of the bathroom look presentable. For her. And perhaps for him, because he didn't want to get in trouble from her. If she didn't tell him, he would ask, probably on their way back from the trip, if he could last that long. He didn't like half-heartedness over this sort of thing, and neither did Ruthie. So maybe she hadn't received the results, and simply needed to do something off-farm, time away like the radio suggested. If so, it surprised him that she wanted him to come along. In the kitchen, there was a beer out for him, and a glass which he wouldn't normally use. He rubbed his hands together. Excellent. Thank you. He poured the beer into the glass, and, realizing he was a little too pleased with himself, asked, "Are you having one?" "Yes, I think I will." She took a wine glass down from the cupboard, retrieved the white wine bottle from the fridge, and filled the large glass 2/3 full. He noticed, nodded at it. "Everything okay?" "Just feel like it tonight. I'm not sure why. Probably put me straight to sleep." She will have her reasons, he told himself, certain this was true. "Chin chin," he said, lifting his glass. She tilted hers towards his and replied, "Salut." After a deep draught, he put the glass down and smacked his lips. "That is good. Should I fire up the barbie?" "Give me a minute. Those steaks won't take long, and I've potatoes to cook." "No worries." She turned to the stove and switched the gas on under the saucepan. He took a seat at the bench and said, "I think 3027 will be fine tomorrow, which means we can go the day after, Thursday. How's that sound?" "I'll book a motel." "You make it sound so glamorous, like there is more than one to choose from." He watched her moving around the kitchen. She was short, slim, and harder bodied than you might expect. Perpetual motion would do that, he guessed. He'd never been able to shake the bit of extra weight that he carried, not that he tried terribly hard. "You never know," she said, taking salad things from the fridge and putting them on the bench. "There might have been a new one built since we were last up that way." "I doubt it. I'd be surprised if I knew anything had been built up that way in the past few years." She didn't look like someone who'd received bad news. She looked as she always did, in control and calmish. He remembered when he first met her at a party at Ricky's place. She was short and dark, and her eyes were intense. It made him notice her, but he hadn't been sure if he wanted to know that person. But she turned out to be fun, easy to be around, and she liked him. After that, he could not forget her. He found ways to go to the places she was going: picnic races, balls, beaches. Of course, Ruthie had made her decision about him long before they got together. Later, she told him that she expected him to show how keen he was. He remembered the word keen, a word from that time, and how it felt to put his arms around her. He could easily recall the wedding in the early years, but so much of the other stuff, the time in between, he needed prompting to bring back. There had been a lot of years and incidents to remember. She never seemed to forget, especially when it involved the children. Every birthday party, school year, sports carnival, and family outing came quickly to mind. What would he do without her? He had imagined it before, thinking he would become one of those boring old blokes who didn't seem to work and spent too much time at the pub and the bolo, looking for someone to listen to them. But when he imagined her gone now, he thought he would just pine, maybe curl up and give up. "Everything all right?" she asked, tossing the green salad. He nodded and took a swig of his beer. "You can start the barbie now if you want." "Oh, right." He slid out of the seat and pretended he had just been waiting for her say-so. It was cooler outside on the back veranda where the barbecue waited. He lit it and put the hood back down. It wasn't as clean as it should be, but that was part of the flavour, wasn't it? The sky was clear and bright, and he stood drinking his beer and looking upwards. He had no idea what he was seeing, but he knew it was beautiful, and he hardly ever found the time to look. He took it for granted, which was worrying, because that's where you got regret from. He went back into the kitchen and took the plate of steaks off the sink. "I put them on?" "Yep. Great. Barbie clean?" "Yep." He carried the meat out and put it sizzling and flaring onto the grill. It made him think life wasn't that bad if you could do this with your partner on a Tuesday. How good. They ate with the TV on, listening and not listening, making observations about the shamelessness of politicians and disagreeing over positions taken. "Jay is ringing every day, wanting to know if we are all right. Especially you for some reason. The publicity about mental health seems to be having its effect." "He's worried I'll get depression." "Maybe. It's possible. There's plenty to be depressed about." "Yes, but..." He was going to say there was just as much to be pleased about, but thought it might be insensitive. "We can endure, can't we?" "We can. We have before." Was it a moment to be sentimental? To squeeze her hand? If it was, he missed it. And sentimentality wasn't her thing. Not with him, anyway. After dinner, they sat on the couch, and Ruthie took out her book. Dimple flicked through the TV channels and gave up. He perused a social media site, but it bored him too. "I'm going to check on 3027. Ruthie nodded, without taking her eyes from the words. She could do that. Disappear into the pages. Sometimes he was jealous of it, and other times he thought it was a strange way to exist, in the make-believe. When she was annoyed by him, she said he lacked imagination, which is why he didn't like fiction. But he didn't think that was true. He decided to walk and take a bit more notice of the beauty of the night. The gravel was crunchy under his feet. The moon was slim, but bright enough to let him see where he was going. He put his phone and its torch away. There was no sound. The birds were asleep, the insects at rest, waiting for the warm nights to come. Then a cow called out for her calf, a sound that pierced like it might carry for 100 miles. He walked the hospital paddock until he saw 3027 at a pile of hay. She was standing, eating, with the calf lying on the ground next to her. He walked in close, and she moved away without looking at him. There was no wobble in her step. He guessed she had not sat back down. She was doing the easy bit. Lifting her body with her back legs to stand up would be the real test. At least she was eating. Now she turned her head to him, looked, and turned back. In the moonlight he saw her indifference, which was a form of trust. He took it as a kind of thank you. He circled around her, careful not to unsettle the calf, and walked across the remaining grass towards the house. A light breeze kicked up, and he wondered where he might be in a year. Or 10. What state would the farm be in? Perpetual drought? He looked at the sky again, and reminded himself that this sort of thinking was not helpful. Far better to be amazed by the expanse above him. He began to hum a song that came rich with memories but vacant of words. It was from a time before marriage and children and responsibility, when his energy was limitless and people forgave a young, good-natured man almost anything. An idea knocked. Why not make the trip last for 2 nights? They could certainly do with it. He would ring his neighbour, Barney, and ask him to feed the cows, the dogs, and the chooks for 1 day. The offer would be reciprocal. He was sure Barney wouldn't mind, and it would give him a chance to get away himself. Barney was a great mountain of a man who worked himself ragged. He would do anything for anyone who asked. Dimple had to be certain that 3027 was okay and that there were no more cows likely to die. Barney would know what to do. He would ring him in the morning. That way, they could have 2 nights on the road and maybe a few drinks and meals somewhere. Ruthie was asleep with her head back, the book on her chest when he made his way into the room. She sat up abruptly. "That took a long time. Is she okay?" "Looks fine. Beautiful night. I was just enjoying it." "No end of beautiful nights." She smiled in a kind way to remove the edge of desperation and got up, clasping the book. "I think I'll go to bed. I'm exhausted." "You don't want a cup of tea?" "No." "Okay." He let her go and slumped into the couch. He listened to her getting ready for bed and flipped through his phone until he found the song he'd been trying to sing. He played it with the volume down low, and then again, and was asleep before the song finished. At first light, 3027 was sitting down in the far end of the paddock, but her head was up, her ears were out, and she appeared to be chewing her cud. Good signs, he thought. He drove over to her, and when he got close, she rolled herself forward and began the mighty process of hefting her hind quarters into the air. Her back legs concertinaed beneath her and stalled. She dropped heavily to the ground. Then she tried again, and her legs found traction and strength and straightened, allowing the front legs to be involved, and together they lifted her body to a standing position. He felt a flutter of joy. "Good girl," he said, the stupidity of the comment part of the fun. He went to rub her tail, but she moved away, no longer in need of him. You had to be happy with that. Ruthie was suddenly somehow behind him and alongside him, saying, "Oh, relief. I suppose we'll have to go to Willie now." "Yes, we will." He had thought she might have changed her mind overnight, expecting some of the heat had gone out of it. But Obviously not. Let's see how she fares the rest of the day, eh? Then if she's right, we can leave tomorrow. She nodded. Her skin was glowing this morning, her face too young for her. Hey, beautiful, he said to her. She raised an unimpressed eyebrow at him. Hey yourself. Do you want a hand to feed? No, I'll be okay. Good, because I want to rake out the chook yard and put new straw in their boxes. Just the straw off the ground. They don't get fresh stuff. Yes, boss. She meant neither of the words. Can you make sure there aren't any other cows down that you haven't seen? None that are looking sick? Yes, boss. He probably meant both of them. I don't want to be going away if something's on the verge of dying. I don't want to see Wally Oliver that much. No, neither did he. He got back into the ute, and she walked to the house, her stride purposeful. His son, Finney, walked like that, even as a teenager, as if he were leading an army unit. Jay never walked in a straight line. He was always detouring to smell the flowers or take an interest in something he'd noticed for the first time. It was ridiculous to miss two adults so much. He and Ruthie had done their best to push their children out into the world, and now they wanted them back. He wished they'd both work the farm with him, bring their partners home, have grandchildren, be members of the community. Stupid stuff. They had much more to do than fulfill their old man's small-time fantasies. He could dream, though. He drove via the dogs, let them off and the chooks out, then went to the little tractor. He started it up and manoeuvred it to the lorry with hay on it. He began picking up bales with the front forks and putting them out in the paddock. The cows sauntered over to the bales, knowing it was their right to be waited on. He parked the tractor, and while the cows ate, he cleaned out 2 water troughs because of a childhood-instilled insistence of his father's that cattle had to have the cleanest possible water at all times. Then he set to fixing the wires and the fences that had been broken by cows pushing each other or getting caught trying to get to a clump of grass just out of reach. The day began to warm up, and the first glow of heat reminded him of what summer could be like. It wouldn't be good. The amount of rain they needed to turn the season around was more than their average expectancy, and if it arrived in small falls every day, or whopping falls just once or twice, the figures would be better than the results. But places got lucky. People did get lucky. They might get a good soft fall, and then another one, and another one, while others watched on, parched, saying how pleased they were for them. Perhaps he needed to get off the farm more than he realized. He had to take up the sportsman's mantra, not worrying about things you couldn't control. He could not control the weather. He should control his thoughts. He should talk to his wife about whether the medical results had arrived or not. It was always Ruthie who opened the mail, so he never knew what he was missing. She might have known for days.
End of CD 1. CD 2.
Chapter 3. Ruthie scratched at the chook pen floor with a rake, dragging back the globs of white and grey manure and the dried-out remains of scraps the chooks had rejected. To not think for 2 days was her plan. Then she would deal with whatever had to be dealt with. Cleaning, organising, tidying up were her mindfulness strategies. And she liked chooks. She knew she was being childish. Jay would be very annoyed at her if he knew. But somehow, the thought of 2 days without the burden of the future, whatever it held, gave her a feeling of bliss, like a magic, endless holiday. Except it wasn't endless. She shoveled the pile of manure and scraps out the gateway into another little mountain. When she was done, she added the old straw from the nests. She replaced it with fresh hay and then washed out their water bowl. The 10 chooks were out, roaming the paddocks, pleasing themselves until sundown, when they would return to their enclosure and its perches, soft hay and security. Ruthie walked the perimeter of the chook yard looking for places where the netting might have been pulled up or dug out. The foxes would love to take a chook, or several, and there was always a goanna and a crow on the watch, hoping for a chance at the eggs. None of it seemed to perturb the little red hens. Their life was a sublime run without bad news. If a fox got in, there would be a few moments of fear and squawking, and their story would be over. Until then, they hadn't a worry in the world, popping out an egg every 29 hours. She had taken the old ute to get the new hay, and now she shoveled the chook manure into the back of it. It would go well in the compost heap and under the citrus trees. In the distance, past the yards and the sheds, she could see Dimple putting along in his side-by-side. She felt bad not telling him, but he would understand. He was good at not taking things to heart. He was a sunny individual, unaware of insults and disapproval. But he could be dark, too. She knew he had not expected drought to be so much of his life. Naturally, he had expected most seasons would be good, most springs soft and full of hope. It hadn't been the case. Droughts were a challenge. That was the way you were supposed to think about them. A challenge to be triumphed over with judicious planning and data-based decision-making. After a while, the fun went out of that, even for Dimple, and a dead cow was enough to dispirit anyone. At least 3027 looked in reasonable shape. It was always surprising how some cows persisted and others fell. And now that her thoughts had got away from her, she hopped into the old ute and fired it up. The seat was soft and the steering wheel peeling, but it did what was asked of it. She drove round the back of the garden, parked, and then shoveled the material onto a pile of cattle manure and filled a wheelbarrow for the citrus trees as well. The roses were shiny green and in full bud. On their own, they were enough to keep her going. The geraniums were in frail pink flower. Their delicate prettiness was like a private joke, because she knew they were as tough as any plant in the garden, one of the few that would survive if she had to give up the relentless watering. She made the decision to check the internet one more time for information about breast cancer. Just once, and then she would stop thinking about it. She tapped on her phone and an entry came up. If treatment does not occur, breast cancer will usually spread to other areas of the body. Very often, the first area that a cancer spreads to is the lymph nodes in the underarm area. Once the cancer enters the lymphatic system, it can, and usually does, spread to other areas of the body. It made her feel sick. She shut the phone quickly. Without thinking, she put her hand up under her breast where the lump was supposed to be. The friar birds were gossiping above her in the trees. You would never think anyone could have that much to say. She would ring the doctor, go straight to town if need be. No. A decision had been made. 48 hours. She would stick by that. She went inside, found the overnight bag, and took it to the bedroom. She was a day early, but she felt like getting set up. She took out clean, suitable clothes for Dimple. The choices were limited, and thought about what would be suitable for her. What did you wear to a confrontation? A dress, she thought, taking the geranium's advice. Always a dress. Let them think you were soft, sweet and feminine, and not capable of putting up a fight. Let them think. She had worn a dress to the family meeting with Dimple's father all those years ago. She had liked that dress, a long, summery floral print. But she had still given him both barrels. He had been using his son for too long. Dimple was not slave labour. Either they received written confirmation of what they could expect in terms of wages and capital, or they were out of there. He could do the work on his own, or hire someone. He was far too mean to hire someone. She had won the day. Within the year, Dimple's father, Eric, had handed over the reins and the checkbook. After that, It was a slide into retirement. Ruthie guessed, with the benefit of hindsight, that he must have known when they confronted him that he was unwell. Otherwise he might have fought more, blustered more, driven a harder bargain. It wouldn't have made any difference. She had had their bags packed, sitting on the front lawn of the small cottage with the tiny bathroom they were forced to live in with 2 small children, while Dimple's parents rattled around in the big house. Dimple had been doing the work and the decision-making for some years. His father had taken a liking to a 4 o'clock scotch on the veranda with the form guide. Dimple would appear after dark, dragging his feet, saying he still had paperwork to do and phone calls to make. For a while he had resisted her putting their case to his father. He spoke about the generosity of his father giving them a job and a house and good prospects. But she knew farmers, especially older farmers, and she knew they did not respond to nice. The arrangement suited him, so he would hang on to it as long as he could. The farm would eventually be Dimple's, so why the fuss? It was obvious that Dimple's mother agreed. They deserved their time, she'd said at dinner once, sweetly. Ruthie had agreed, genuinely. But that time didn't extend endlessly. Within 2 years, Dimple's father was having problems with his heart that left him dizzy and confused. Within 3 years, he was dead. It was a large funeral, and Ruthie remembered thinking it was undeservedly large. Dimple's father had spent a lifetime looking after his own needs. At the wake, Dimple's mother had the look of someone who was having trouble suppressing her joy. Dimple did not seem to have inherited the characteristics of his father, or his mother for that matter. Sometimes you had to be thankful for good fortune. The spark of a silly idea took her to the kitchen, where she found a recipe for Anzac biscuits in her recipe book, made of faded, typed-up pages, magazine cutouts and internet printouts. She scanned the ingredients: rolled oats, flour, brown sugar, desiccated coconut, golden syrup, and then the method, reminding herself that she didn't need reminding. She got out a bowl and allowed herself to disappear into a process she knew well. While the biscuits were baking, she sat at the kitchen bench and took out a pen and a piece of blank paper. She wrote, mouthing words and stopping occasionally to look up at the ceiling and tap the pen against her bottom lip. When she was done, she folded the paper and put it in her handbag with the biro. She had been very angry when she heard this Wally person on the radio. Angry enough to want to get straight into the car and drive all that way to tell him to his face what she thought of him. But anybody could see this was a foolish idea. Her better judgment, her knowledge that anger didn't help any situation, made her control herself. Yet somehow, the reminder of her mortality made her really want to go and see the self-serving prick. Was it not enough for people to suffer drought without being told they should suffer, that their suffering was just part of an economic equation? Suddenly, she could not wait. But now, as she sorted through the clothes and thought about the drive with Dimple, free of the cows and the water and the fences and the hay and her news, she realised she was looking forward to going away, and the desire to give Wally what for was slowly turning into an excuse for indulging in average Chinese food and expensive cheap white wine in Willie, and a motel with one of those bedspreads, an awful print on the wall, and terrible instant coffee. Despite the food and the motel decor being ubiquitous, it seemed almost exotic. If you stayed on one farm, in one house for long enough, any place could be counted as foreign and unusual. It was so long since they'd been anywhere except into town or Stony Creek that she had to make sure they still had a toiletry bag, and if they did, that it wasn't mouldy and torn. She got down on her hands and knees and reached into the back of the bathroom vanity where the toiletry bag should have been. She found one and extracted it. It was plastic and floury, and probably not fit to be seen. She couldn't think who it had belonged to. Who would own such an ugly thing? But it was clean and free of anything like mould. She stood up, put it on the side of the sink, and then decided, as almost always, that vigilance was the price of peace, and proceeded to wash it out with hot water. Then she upended it to dry next to the sink. When Dimple came in that night, his first comment was, "I think we'll be right to leave around 8 tomorrow. How's that sound?" "Great. I'm all organised. Bags packed, clothes sorted. Yours too." I rang Barney. He's going to feed tomorrow morning for me and check on the dogs and the chooks. "What for?" "Just in case we decide to stay an extra night." He wasn't sure what response to expect. She might be annoyed. Ruthie hated asking neighbours for favours. "What a nice idea. Maybe we could get a meal other than Chinese." "Burgers? Service station pie?" "So you're looking forward to it then?" "You know, I just might be. I never liked Wally's old man, Ian Bloody Oliver, always very pleased with himself. I heard him say once to a woman in a shop who was giving him trouble, 'Do you know who I am?'" "Where did you know him from?" "I don't remember him at all. Went to ag college with him, played football with him and against him, then saw him about at field days and crop research trips." "So you've got history with this family?" "Not really. I never crossed him or anything. He was the sort of fella who only remembered my name if he needed something." "Was?" "Died about 5 years ago. Some sort of cancer." "Oh." Not thinking about it, remember? Not thinking about it. "Now I feel sorry for him." "If he's anything like his dad, you won't feel it for long." Dimple was up before first light, not because he needed to be, but because he was restless and concerned the cows might not be right. He needed to see them as soon as he could to make sure there was nothing to worry about and that he hadn't missed any cows in trouble. "You can't see anything in the dark, you know," Ruthie said from the bed, over her blanketed shoulder as he pulled on his clothes. "Be light soon enough." Cereal and a cup of tea would fill in the wait. He left the bedroom, but she didn't say any more. He turned on a low light in the kitchen and placed his bowl in the cereal container soundlessly on the bench. When he'd poured the milk, he took a seat and began to scoop the cereal into his mouth. "Are we really going to do this?" he asked himself between mouthfuls. "Hi, Wally. We wanted to talk to you about some things you said on the radio that we thought were unfair, and we wanted to tell you you're a fuckwit." He tried to picture it. Maybe they'd catch him at his massive machinery sheds full of shiny equipment worth millions of dollars. Or they'd call him and he'd agree to meet them at his front ramp. Neutral territory, as it were. Or perhaps he'd invite them in for a cup of tea and a chat about the state of agriculture and the way forward. It was madness. Even more obviously so as the sun sent its first minions running out across the sky. Dimple would play along and then discourage her when they got there. Did she really want to do this? Did she expect Wally to listen politely? Maybe they could go for a picnic or something instead. There was a big river out there. At least, it was big sometimes. He could use it to distract Ruthie, suggesting a glass of wine while they stretched out underneath an ancient river gum. Cunning as a shithouse rat. That was Dimple Travers. He rinsed his bowl in the sink, decided against tea, and went out the back door into the fresh, clean morning. There was no evidence that any of the other cows were unwell. He drove around them twice, stood up any sitting cows, and woke snoozing calves. Even 3027 looked fine. If there was ever a time to go, it was now. Barney turned up at 7, and Dimple ran him through the procedures and the trick with starting the tractor and the shed where the dog biscuits and chook feed were held. "I was thinking the wife and I might get away in about 3 weeks' time," Barney said when they were finished. "If that fits in with you." "Shouldn't be a problem. We can set the dates when I get back." He waved his neighbour off, feeling like he'd been smart, and maybe even a bit sensitive to Ruthie's needs, whatever they might be. When he got back to the house, Ruthie was dressed, her hair dry, ready to go. "It's only 7:30. You're cranking the pressure up," he said. "No, I had a shower and put on some nice clothes so I wouldn't start doing any jobs around the house. I'm on holidays." He could feel himself grinning. There was joy, unexpected in this strange outing. "Right, I'll be quick. I want to be on holidays too." He moved quickly towards the shower, her laughter the sweet peep of a butcher bird around him. And then they were sitting in the car looking at each other, giggling, young lovers on their first trip away together. She smiled at him and said, "Don't say, 'Here we go then, will you?' It was the sort of thing both their fathers had said. Wouldn't dare. He drove out of their garden and along their entrance road, unable to steady the little waves of elation. Even if they turned back 5 kilometres from home, it was worth it. Ruthie saw her husband's stupid pleasure and knew why she was still with him. They shared a sense of things. After half an hour, she said, "I brought a thermos and some biscuits." "You did not." Their private joke put light in his eyes. "I did. Baked especially." "You didn't smell them?" "Oh yes, I forgot. When the cow—" Anyway, the generation before them had taken their thermoses and sandwiches and biscuits with them on long trips. Before coffee became a widespread religion, the travellers would stop on the side of the road for a break and some refreshments. Ruthie and Dimple had always seen this as quaint and dated, the self-sufficiency and thriftiness of the ones who'd gone before. The possibility of the practice had become a currency between them when they started taking the long trips to see their children in the city. Now he was impressed by the thought she had put into their trip. "Is it for morning tea or afternoon?" "I thought we'd stop near our destination and make sure everything was right. Have a break and get ourselves ready. Maybe talk through our strategy." "I was thinking we'd be diplomatic. Point out to him that what he said might tip some people over the edge. Real people on real farms. Tell him we get his argument, but that he needs to show some care for his fellow farmers." "That's roughly what I was thinking. But if he ignores me, I can't guarantee I'll be nice." When they passed their first town without stopping, she asked, "Do you want to use the GPS for directions?" "Nah, let's just wing it." She liked the response. "You know, he mightn't even be home. Could be on a tractor or on another one of their places or something." "Of course. But I need to do it. If we can't see him, I'll drop a letter in his mailbox. Is he married?" "Apparently. Letter?" "Yes, I wrote one. Not quite finished." "You are serious?" "I am." On the side of the road, the grass was green from the water that ran off the tar, but the paddocks that stretched away from the road were dry and brown. She took out her phone and plugged it in. "Time for a bit of music." He nodded, not really paying attention. "I made a list." A song from the 1980s began to lilt and thump out of the audio. Dimple grinned. A favourite. She was girlish now. It's so easy these days, isn't it? Remember the hours you had to put in to make a favourites mixtape on a cassette? This made him laugh out loud and slap a hand on the steering wheel. I never got the hang of it. I'd get halfway through and give up. No one ever let me make the party tape because it would only have 5 songs on it. I was the expert. I made them for friends as presents, for parties, everything. There's probably still one in the bottom of the cupboard somewhere. What's on this one? Mostly oldies. Everything we like. They listened and hummed and half sang the words. Perhaps we should keep driving. Take a turn and head to the coast. Get an agent to sell the cattle and then the farm and never go home. Start afresh. We'd only need a small house. Maybe even choose one we could renovate, Dimple said. She was silent, letting herself indulge a holiday pleasure, fantasizing about never going home about the alternate lives you might live that you knew you wouldn't. Before they knew it, they'd be buying wines they were sure they liked, pretending they wouldn't taste awful at home. Ruthie looked out the window as the country began to flatten. There was the occasional green paddock, but mostly it was parched and stricken. If treatment does not occur, breast cancer will usually spread to other areas of the body. "Are we really this desperate?" she asked, her face turned to the landscape. "Sorry?" Dimple was in his own blissful world without chores to do, machinery to fix and cattle to care for. "Can we be this excited over one night away? Maybe it's just me." "No, I'm excited. Like a kid. Like I'm taking my first boogie board to the beach. Remember that?" He gave a deep sigh. "I guess we've left it too long. Didn't realise. Didn't want to think about it, I suppose. And it's not even a holiday. It's a social justice thing. A mission to set the slate right." "I didn't realise. I suddenly feel significant. A bit super. Maybe I could get a cape or something. Undies outside my pants? You can wear what you like, but I wouldn't say picking clothes for yourself was your strong suit." She turned the music down and put on the news. The horizon receded as the country started to flatten out. There was no green on the side of the road here. In places, there were bright green crops in circles under centre pivots. The fresh, thick crops in an almost moonscape gave the sense of science fiction. "Always hard to like an irrigator," Dimple said, and meant it. "You'd do that if you could." Probably. In the distance, the river, lined tightly with trees, wove into view, like a green seam in a beige fabric. "Hope they left some water in it for the cattle and sheep blokes downriver," Dimple said. "Is it the same river the Olivers live on?" "Yep, except another one joins it in the meantime. Gives them even more water." She didn't say anything, not wishing to get him worked up over water. As some American had said, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. She wasn't here for that. Water was a whole nother world of dispute. The river had seemed close. Took some time for its steep banks to appear alongside them. She couldn't see the water. If it was there, it was at the bottom of a canyon. Would they remove her breast, she suddenly thought? Mastectomy. The word was as ugly as the thought, but it wasn't a big price to pay for life, was it? She knew she could deal with it if she had to. Have a reconstruction if she couldn't. It was the sort of vanity she had never approved of. She would feel ridiculous. Anyway, she was not supposed to be thinking about that, any of it. Then, after travelling through a long stretch of the flattest country and alongside a river with unseen water, Dimple pointed out where another river cut across from the plain and joined the first. They crossed a large bridge, and then the new river was on their left as they sped north. She could see the water now, wide, probably deep, and not quite brown. It was a nice sight. "We're probably only 20 kilometres away. Do you want to stop for that coffee?" "Sure." He waited until there was a flat open section between the road and the river and guided the car in. They both got out. The temperature was surprisingly pleasant. The sky was blue, supporting a few drifting, pointless clouds. Ruthie opened the back of the car and took the thermos, 2 cups, and the biscuit tin out of the esky. She poured their coffees, added sugar to his, and handed his to him. They sat together on the back above the bumper, their feet on the ground, looking down at the water. She offered him a biscuit and he said, "Yum," took one and bit into it. "Bloody good. You made them chewy, the way I like them. I'll look after you." "You do. And I'm thankful." It was only a game. They drank and ate and allowed nothing in between them. Then he asked, "Do you still want to see this guy?" "Of course." You're sure? Are you scared? Embarrassed, maybe. Embarrassed? By me? No. By turning up unannounced, not even knowing if he's there, not certain it'll do anything except have us kicked off the place. Okay. For me, it's like this. She slumped a little. All these big farmers believe in survival of the fittest because they think they're the fittest, when really, they're simply the fattest. They can't stand to lose a bit of lard. They're as bad as the banks and the companies that own the old people's homes and the bloody politicians and all the rest of them at the big end of town. She paused. Her voice was wobbling a little bit, and her face was flushed. Someone has to say to their faces that they're wrong, that they can't hide from the people they care so little about. So, I need to do that. She placed the last 6 words very deliberately. Even if it's embarrassing, even if he gives us the shortest shrift possible, I need to do it. Then I'm with you. I needed to hear that you were serious. Now that I know, I've got no problems. Full steam ahead. He smiled at her, and she looked away, unwilling for him to see how little she could control the emotion. He threw the dregs of his coffee on the ground and got up. It's nearly 12. I'm guessing he has lunch around the same time as everyone else, so let's not waste any time. She put the things away, and they got back into the car, and he spun the wheels in the soft dirt to let her know his blood was up and that he was ready for action. Chapter 4. A bend in the road directed them to the huge timber entrance of Lakeland Farms. There was a broad ramp with timber post and panel either side, and timber double gates in the next section of the construction. A sign said, "No entry without authorization. Visitors, please contact management." Alongside it was a communications box on a post that looked better suited to a government facility. They looked at each other. Ruthie did not show any sign of retreat, so he pulled the car in close to the box, leant out his window, pushed a button and said, "Dylan and Ruth Travers, here to see Wally Oliver." He sat back. There was no response. They waited. Dimple said, "Should I try again?" Ruthie was about to say yes when she noticed a vehicle coming towards them across the paddock. It was a large white ute, tricked up with aerials and chrome and huge knobbly tyres, moving fast and kicking dust behind it. She pointed at it, and Dimple followed her finger. "Do you think we could get security like this?" he asked. She didn't reply because the ute had crossed the table drain onto the road and was almost at the ramp. Then it was alongside their car. Inside was a young man, bronze-faced, in a big hat and a clean blue shirt. He didn't get out of his vehicle. He just wound down the window and said, "Hi, you've got an appointment with Mr. Oliver," in a flat security guard's voice. Dimple could see he had the words Lakeland Farms embroidered on his pocket. "No, we just wanted to talk to him." "You from the media?" He was stern now. Nothing worse in the world than the media. "No, we're farmers." "Dimple?" "Yes?" "It's Scott. Scott Fraser. I used to work at the O'Toole's down near you." Suddenly the man was relaxed, even boyish, getting out of his car to shake Dimple's hand. "Scott, good to see you. How have you been? Sorry I didn't recognize you in the big hat." He grinned goofily and adjusted the headwear. "Comes with the territory." "You remember my wife, Ruthie?" Ruthie leant across and gave a little wave. "Yeah. Hi, Mrs. Travers." "How's the job?" "It's good. The boss is a genius. He does so many brilliant things. This is a massive operation, which means I get to do all sorts of cool stuff." "Including security?" "Ha, yeah. It's okay. Bit of variety, you know. How can I help you guys?" "We wanted to have a chat to Wally." "I'm pretty sure he's in the office, but he doesn't like call-ins, what with all the bloody media these days. Do you know him? Like, personally? Not really. I knew his father a bit. I'll have to contact him. Can I ask what it's about? Ruthie and Dimple looked across the car at each other. The unspoken question was, do we tell a lie to get access and get Scott into trouble, or tell the truth and risk being turned away? Just tell him, Ruthie whispered. We heard him on the radio saying drought was a good way of getting rid of the farmers who were battling, and we wanted to tell him, to his face, that he was wrong, and he was hurting a lot of people, Dimple said. Oh, okay. Scott stopped, turned his head sideways and looked back at them. You're being fair dinkum. You're not taking the piss. Nope, we're serious. Give me a minute and I'll talk to him. They sat and waited, while Scott walked up the road, phone to his ear. Don't like our chances, Dimple said, trying to guess what Scott might be saying by the bobbing of his head. No. Scott jogged back to their car. Yeah, he'll see you. If you follow me, I'll take you up. Great. You haven't got any firearms in there, do you? No. Why? Can't be too careful. A lot of crazy protesters and activists about these days. He turned, stepped across the road and got into his vehicle. He started it up and yelled out, "Follow me!" before reversing at speed and swinging the vehicle around in the other direction. They hung back so Scott's dust didn't envelop them and took in the landscape. The road was gravel, but well maintained. The grass country was clipped up, but every fence was straight and true and without broken or sagging wires. Then the farming country started. It was black and deeply furrowed. Where there was a crop, it was administered to by giant lateral move irrigators, and in other places by channels of flowing water. When they drove up the only rise for some distance around, they could see the sheen of water shining off dams that stretched for kilometres. Like little lakes, Ruthie said. The road in was long, straight and flat, and it seemed to take an hour before a complex of silos, sheds and houses became visible. They drove in among sheds full of shiny equipment with huge fuel tanks standing as sentries. Nearby, a silo complex with a weighbridge, endless ladders and electrical equipment took up maybe a hectare. There seemed to be big, chromed, aerial waving utes at every turn. Dimple and Ruthie were saying, "Wow," and "bloody hell," under their breath at every new extravagant construction. Scott guided them to the largest building, which sat at a distance from the main settlement. It was a house the size of several houses that stretched itself out into a lush garden, bigger than a town park. To one side was a swimming pool with a water slide and cabanas that might have been family houses in any other context. The timber fence had sculpted heads sitting on top of every post. A small, dark-haired man was bent over a swathe of brightly coloured flowers and did not look up at them. Scott parked at a front gate, and they pulled in alongside him. As they got out, a large man came half-trotting down the squishy lawn to greet them. He was tall and heavy, but not particularly overweight. More like a recently retired footballer, Dimple thought. At his side was a large German shepherd. Scott introduced Dimple and Ruthie to Wally. "Scotty tells me you came all this way to tell me I'm wrong." "Yes, we did." Ruthie was determined to say what needed to be said. Wally took a careful look at them. "You better come in then, and tell me all about it." He opened the gate and offered his hand to Dimple and then Ruthie, as Scott returned to his security vehicle. "Don't mind the General," he said, waving the dog away. "Do you want a cup of tea?" he asked as he ushered them through the gate. "Sorry, my wife's away, in Italy, so it'll be a bit rough and ready." "I'm sure it'll be fine," Ruthie said, trying not to be caught off guard by the man's version of easy bonhomie. As they walked across the lawn to the house, their feet sinking into the lushness, Wally said, "So, You didn't agree with what I said on the radio. I thought I was pretty fair. Two colourful, flightless birds of a type that Ruthie didn't recognise strutted across the lawn in front of them. "It's good of you to see us," Ruthie said, making sure she wasn't sidetracked by the birds. "Ah, well, you've come such a long way, I couldn't say no. Besides, I like to talk these things through, hear other people's opinions. I hate the way people on social media can't listen to another point of view." He opened the door and held it for them. Ruthie stepped into a long, wide, tiled entrance area that opened into an area of couches, low tables and soft chairs, and a large fireplace below a flue that disappeared into a high ceiling. At the table in the centre of it, a young Asian woman in casual clothes, her dark hair in a ponytail, was putting down a tray of jugs and cups. She straightened and smiled at them, then turned and walked towards the doors at the other end of the room that might have led to a kitchen. "Take a seat," Wally said. "Susie's putting out some tea and coffee for us, and there's cake coming." Another Asian woman emerged from a room to their left. When she saw Dimple and Ruthie, she looked startled, and for a moment appeared unsure where to go. Then she walked quickly in the direction of the doors the other woman had disappeared through. Ruthie noticed the woman was adjusting her clothes in a way that suggested she had dressed in a hurry. Ruthie and Dimple sat down on the soft chairs and didn't look at each other. "Tea or coffee?" Wally sat forward on his seat, his bulk too big, his pants too tight for the delicate job. He poured their choices and passed the cups across to them. Susie arrived with an orange cake and placed it on a space on the table, sliced 4 pieces, and left again. "Please, help yourself," Wally said, taking a piece of cake and sitting back. His guests silently fussed with each other for a moment, and then settled on a piece each. Through glass panels they could see a courtyard of flowers, all heights and hues, centred around a fountain that shot a thick stream of water into the air, leaving behind a cool mist as it dropped back down to a moat-like base. "Dimple, is that it? You knew Dad? Went to ag college with him?" Dimple didn't bother to think how Wally knew this. "Yeah, we saw each other on and off over the years. I miss him. He was my hero. I wish I'd known him better. He was always so busy, you know. So much of what you see here on this place he did. I've just extended on it." "Remarkable." Dimple said it to stay civil, but it felt like a small betrayal. "You've got a place down near Stony Creek? Cattle and cropping?" "That's it," said Dimple. "A bit lean at the moment, though." "Yeah, we're all going through that. Hope it ends soon." Ruthie noticed he said it without feeling. They sounded like words he'd used many times before and never once meant. "Scott vouched for you, by the way. It's why I invited you in. And the fact that you knew Dad. Otherwise I would have presumed you were journalists or activists of some kind, trying to get pictures or video of something incriminating. Not that there's anything incriminating around here, but you know how they twist things." "So, what you said about the drought getting rid of the weaker farmers who shouldn't be in farming anyway, was that twisted or taken out of context?" Ruthie asked. "No, that's what I said. It might not be that nice, but it's not wrong, is it?" "When it's in the media, it is. You're calling the people who are struggling losers. It's like you're rubbing it in." Ruthie said it as sweetly as she could, worried, despite all the goodwill, that she would lose her cool and her coherence. "It's always been this way. There's no reason to pretend otherwise." "We haven't always pointed it out in the media," Dimple said. "They asked me what I thought and I told them. And, frankly, the people I'm talking about are losers." Ruthie took a quick breath and then gave a little cough to disguise it. "They don't have enough capital to run their farms like businesses, so they make bad decisions. When you don't have enough money, you make choices that you have to make, not the ones you should. So, they get into trouble and make us all look bad." "That's not always the case. Plenty of people are very careful with their money and know their limitations. Some droughts just exceed all expectations, Dimple said. Wealthy operations can withstand drought much longer. That might be true, but the world where you could have 100 cows or 1,000 sheep or 1,000 acres of cropping and call yourself a farmer is gone. Now, I don't mind if people want to do that stuff, but they have to be able to finance it. They can't start whinging when things get a bit tough. They can't go asking the government for help the minute it gets a bit dry. They can't turn up in the media, making us all look incompetent and pathetic. If it takes a bit of brutality to get rid of people like that, then that's what we need. You're kicking them when they're down, Ruthie said. All I'm doing is telling the truth. And what if the extreme circumstances, the droughts, the floods, the storms, get worse? Is that the farmer's fault? Farmers have to be able to handle whatever is thrown at them. I think we need to be fair to everyone, Dimple said. Wally sat forward on his seat, clapped his hands lightly and said, Let me tell you the bad news. I'm right, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. The government doesn't give a fuck about the small guys. Neither does industry or the farm lobby groups. You know what they give a fuck about? Output. They want agriculture to produce as much as it possibly can, and the best way to do that is support the big guys. You know what that means? It means I'll get the water allocation I want. The government, wherever possible, will turn a blind eye to my water use. And if some bureaucrat or a do-gooder protester comes along and accuses me of something, the politicians will talk meaningless bullshit until everyone gets bored with the topic and moves on to another crisis. Same with anything that gets in my way. There'll be outrage on social media and maybe even a few stories on it in the mainstream. Might be a fine and a big fuss, but the pollies and lobby groups will come in behind me. They'll run interference, create distractions, defer and defer. Eventually, it all just goes away. That's the way the world is, and you'd better get used to it. Ruthie stood and clenched her hands. I refuse to get used to the world you are talking about. This is a democracy. You shouldn't have more rights than anyone else. I'm very sorry that you are happy to profit from that circumstance. I came here to remind you that there are lots of real people, good people out there genuinely suffering that you are happy to dismiss with a couple of glib lines. They exist, and they matter. She paused, her piece said. Thank you for the hospitality. Let's go, Dimple. Wally slapped his large thighs and stood up. We'll just have to agree to disagree, I guess. Nice to meet you, though, and have a chance to talk things through. Dimple stood slowly and said, Oh, fuck off, you self-serving shit. You've created a bloody kingdom here by stealing from your neighbours in your community, and you think that's your right. Ruthie watched Wally clench a fist and take a step towards Dimple. Dimple did not move. Don't let your courage fail you now, she thought. Wally unclenched his hand and forced himself into the refuge of disdain. It's business, mate. That's all. If you can't handle that, it's your problem. Dimple reached a hand out to Ruthie, and they turned and walked to the door. They'd almost reached it when Wally said, Listen, my grandfather bought this place from the guys who first settled it, the people who got rid of the black fellas who lived along this river. They did what they had to do. Fought them, shopped them, and shared their diseases. Sounds bad, but if they didn't, they probably would have starved. Dimple and Ruthie stopped with their backs to him and waited for a punchline. So, you see, everyone does what they have to. You take advantage of the circumstances you find yourself in, and we do it because we already know about drought and flood and fire out here. We didn't need climate change boffins to warn us about it. We do it because if we don't, we won't survive. It's business. Simple as that. You're too naive to see it, which is why you and your type will disappear. The only players are big players. Dimple and Ruthie kept walking, not stopping or talking until they were in the car and Dimple had it started. He backed back too quickly, over-revving the engine and swinging the steering wheel. When they were finally over the ramp, Dimple said, "Fuck, what was that? I thought he was going to punch you. I basically called him a thief in his own house. I was proud of you. He would have hurt me. Not for long." He began to laugh, loudly and joyfully, hitting the door hard with an open hand. "That's not what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say something caring or point out what a fuckwit he was." Ruthie was giggling. He was big. Then they were laughing uncontrollably. "Your face when he said, 'That's the way the world is and you'd better get used to it.' Oh man, so good. I thought you were going to slap him. What about you? He's doing the nice to meet you thing, thinking he's got us whipped, and you pipe up and tell him to F off." Their faces were red, their eyes watering, and Dimple was having trouble keeping the car on the road. Eventually the laughing subsided in whimpers and wiping of faces. They were quiet and grinning for a while, and then Ruthie said, "Do you think he was right about the water? He would get what he wanted?" "Dunno. Probably just big talk." "The Aboriginal stuff was awful." "I know. Shot them, fought them, shared their diseases. I mean, wow." Ruthie was oblivious to the scenery. It had become a zoetrope whizzing beside her. It was the past that was suddenly real. "I guess that happened in our area too?" "Maybe. But you wouldn't know, would you? There are no records, nothing. It's like they never really lived there." "We don't talk about that, do we?" "No. No one does. Apparently there was a war, and we won the war. To the victor the spoils." "Is that the way people think?" "I don't know. Hard to pretend we're innocent." "So, we're next in line to lose the war?" "Maybe." She was holding onto the handle of the door, gripping it tightly. "You know the weird thing?" she said. "I've never thought about it. I just sort of accepted that they drifted away. White people arrived, the indigenous locals were wandering around, not doing much. There was a bit of fighting, and then the common cold wiped the black fellas out. I've never asked one question about it. I knew some of them must have got shot, had to have been, but I never thought about the economic consequences of all that." "I don't think I had either, really. Maybe tried not to." Alongside them the country was dark and bare. Even the river looked parched. Ruthie looked out the window and breathed deeply. "There's something I haven't told you. And I should have." Dimple didn't look. He nodded his head. "I got the results back on the biopsy. It's a tumour, and it's malignant." The tyres seemed suddenly loud. He thought for a moment he might let go of the steering wheel and let the car take them out into whatever world it wanted to take them to. "I kind of guessed." "I apologise. It was unfair of me. But at least the tumour is small." She let the words out, clipped and official, as if she had been ordered to say them. The tumour. Suddenly an entity, like an insistent cousin or a difficult neighbour. "Did you talk to the doctor?" "No." "No?" He sat up and leant towards her. "Shit, Ruthie, what are you thinking?" "I will, but not until I get home." "Oh, for goodness sake, you can't put this off." "I just need a couple of days. At least ring the doctor and organise the dates and times for your treatment. This isn't the sort of thing to stuff around with. Don't talk to me like I'm a child." She wasn't annoyed, merely protective. "You're acting like one. I think we should pull over and call your doctor. What if you need to be admitted immediately?" 48 hours will not shorten or lengthen my life. It will make no difference except in my head, where I need it." "How do you know that?" I just do. Have you been told more than you're letting on? No. She rubbed her hands up and down the top of her thighs. I promise. But can I please have this time? He could hear she was upset, but disguising it. It's just you and me, away from the farm, our family and our friends, and we won't even think about it. We won't let it spoil our time for 48 hours. And then I'll be ready to face whatever it is I have to face. Okay. He was quiet, letting the white lines in the middle of the road count the seconds. And then he asked, in a voice that was supposed to suggest a line between then and now, So, how are you feeling? I feel fine. Just mortal. Fair enough. For a while, there was only the sound of their tyres on the blacktop and the faint whir of the motor. The sign for the turn-off to Willie came up. I'd like to keep driving for a bit if you don't mind. I need to let my thoughts kind of spin around in my head for a while. Maybe we could make it to Burriga. I'd like that. Ruthie looked at the trees and the river flicking past. She said the words to herself over and over. River, trees, water. River, trees, water. Forcing everything else out of her brain. When she felt calmer, she said, I'll ring the motel and the restaurant and cancel. You booked the restaurant in Willie? You thought they'd be booked out. You never know. After the call, she asked him, Were we out of our minds back there? Going to see him? Having coffee and cake with him? Completely bonkers. I can't even tell you why I thought it would achieve anything. Was pretty insane, but I feel like it was kind of satisfying, you know? I feel the same thing. Crank that music up, would you? Ruthie put on a run of songs that they both knew as well as they knew any song. They sang loudly and raucously, adding every sound effect and backing vocal they could. After they'd driven for 3/4 of an hour and it was mid-afternoon, Ruthie said, I've got some ham and salad rolls if you wanted to stop. Really? You have gone back in time, haven't you? I didn't know where we'd be at lunchtime and if there'd be anywhere to eat. Better than spending money on something greasy from a service station. As soon as we see a good spot, I'll pull over. They drove for a little longer, and then saw a water point for the stock route coming up in a bay off the side of the road. Dimple steered into it and found a spot under a tree, and they both got out. Stock had been removed from the route, so the area was grassy and untrampled. Dimple strolled over to the tank and the trough, stretching his legs while Ruthie repeated her morning tea procedure. How are you feeling? She asked him after she had unwrapped the rolls. Weird. I can't decide if we should go home and try harder or sell up and get out. I mean, what he said was nasty, but we know he's probably right. And if we're going to have more droughts and bigger storms and worse frosts, what are we fighting for? He expected she might argue against this, but she didn't. What would we do? I don't know. Start a business in town somewhere? Farm machinery, a tyre business, a newsagent? Buggered if I know. We would have a fair bit of capital. It would have to be on a large block, though. I can't stand the idea of living in town, only having a cat and a dog, and being a few metres from our neighbours. I'm not suggesting right now, but maybe we should be considering it as an option. We've always considered it, and we've always said no. But now I'm feeling like it's worth more thought. I guess we don't want to be that couple that doggedly fights on for years and finally leaves the farm to go straight to the nursing home. No. I want to have some fun in the last years. Do some interesting things. Meet some fascinating people. Our friends can be fascinating. They can. But wouldn't it be good to meet some new fascinating people? The type who don't talk about farming or How difficult their elderly mother is, or why their renovations are so exhausting? Dimple sucked at his teeth and squinted at her. Sounds a little bitter. You know what I mean? I guess so. They finished eating and got back into the car. This time Ruthie drove. A sign said, Burriger, 50. Dimple sat back in the seat and closed his eyes. Ruthie asked, Do you remember when we went camping with the kids when they were little and you caught that fish? It was as big as Finny was. He couldn't hold it up for the photo. Jay was heartbroken. He forced you to throw it back. I remember, he said without opening his eyes. It would have fed us for a couple of days. There was no way I was going to let Jay tell me what to do. But he wasn't going to let it happen. It's nice when your children turn out to have hearts. It is, but Jay might have a bit too much. Can't have too much. No, I suppose not. But he's got some hard lessons to learn about how tough life can be. We spoiled them? No. We protected them from the world. For a while, like good parents should. Would you have liked to have had more? Maybe. I don't know. I'm proud of our boys. I mean, I don't think there's anything missing or lacking in the family we've got. It makes me happy when I hear you say out loud you're proud of Finny. I guess my track record isn't great, but I'm still proud of him. It was true. There was nothing that made her happier than to hear him say it. It would be nice to have grandchildren. I think you've got a while to wait. Ruth realised she had been worrying about the future in a way she hadn't since the boys were little. Her future, in fact. I wonder what the world will be like when they do arrive, she said. Can't be good, I guess. Do you really think that? More and more, especially after today. Is that what the indigenous people out here felt when the white people took over? Much, much worse, I guess. I know that. I'm not suggesting our situation is the same. Wally Oliver isn't killing anyone. I meant the sense that the future is awful. Chilling, isn't it? And we're not even small farmers. It's not just for farmers, though. The future looks bleak for everyone. The sound of her saying the words gave him a shudder of something like fear. It wasn't a throwaway line or some idea in a discussion. She meant it. The future looks bleak for everyone. And he agreed with her.
End of CD 2. CD 3.
Chapter 5. A sign announcing the limits of Burriger Shire went past. The number of houses began to increase, and the gaps between them to reduce until they were quarter-acre close, and then less. There were some new houses of pale brick topped by slate-grey roofs, but most of the buildings were older, the wear and tear disguised by coats of paint and neat lawns. Ruthie took them through the main street and past the Burriger Motel. It looked squat and plain and lonely. Let's try that big pub in the main drag, Dimple suggested, knowing what his wife was thinking. She turned the car around and went back the way they'd come. The Plains Hotel was a 2-story red brick building with verandas on the second floor. Ruthie parked on the street so they could check if there were any vacancies. Inside, the dark wood furniture and timber panelling gave the impression that this was a place of substance. The decor hadn't been upgraded recently, but Ruthie didn't think it looked outdated. "This is nice," she said, and she could tell Dimple was pleased to hear it. The small, thin man behind the bar said there were plenty of rooms free so they could take their pick. When they asked him where they should have dinner, he said there was a Chinese a few doors down. "It's the same as every other Chinese, so at least you know what you're getting. The pub restaurant is open at 6. They drove in behind the pub to the parking area and then carried their bags up the back way. a set of outdoor timber stairs to the second floor. The room was simple, with cream walls, a dark wardrobe with a large mirror in its centre, a small sink, a carpet that would have been garish if it wasn't so faded, and a lumpy-looking double bed. There was Wi-Fi, but no TV, and the bathroom was down the hall. "At least you're not wasting any money on me," she said, sitting down on the bed and allowing one bounce. "Let's go for a wander down the street." "Like we're on vacation?" "Sure. Let me change." The street was quiet, with cars parked at intervals along the curb and older people walking in isolated pairs on the footpath. Dimple and Ruthie strolled too, happily, like lovers, looking in shop windows. Some of them were bare, others looked like they soon would be. The newsagent was empty, except for a short, plump, grey-haired woman who moved hurriedly from the magazine stand to the counter and back, as if there was far too much work for one woman to do. "How's it going?" Dimple asked, stepping in the doorway. "Oh, hello." The woman seemed a little startled by human contact. Her hair was cut in a bob that was more like a bowl. She swiveled her head to look at Dimple briefly, and then turned back to the stack of newspapers she was bent over. Dimple swung his body to one side and then the other as he looked around the room. "Nice shop. How's business?" The woman stood up and gave Dimple a look that asked, "Are you serious?" She walked back behind the counter, did something to the cash register and said, "Used to be a license to print money, this place." She swept the room with a glance. "Not now. Had it on the market for 2 years. Hardly a nibble. Not serious ones, anyway." "Same as home," said Dimple. "You've got a news agency?" The woman visibly softened. "No, I just mean in my local town, Freshwell." "Ah, Freshwell." The woman went back to whatever interested her on the counter. "Dying, just like Burriga, I hear." "So they say." "It's tough for the small towns. If you're not selling something to do with agriculture, you're in trouble." "Yeah, everything else they can get in the big towns are online," Dimple said. "The internet wiped us out," the woman said, continuing down an obviously well-worn track. "Magazines and newspapers, paper, pens and pencils, even lottery tickets aren't wanted as much anymore. And if you don't come in to buy a newspaper, you don't buy the little something else that you used to. A drink, a card, a chocolate bar, a toy." She slapped her hands down hard on the countertop and then picked up a pile of paperwork. Which, of course, was the cream. She put the pile down, turned to Ruthie and said, "But enough of that. What are you guys doing in town?" "Just travelling through. Stopped off for the night." "Stopped off in Burriga? Interesting choice." She was suddenly playful. "People don't normally stop off in Burriga unless they have family here, or work, or they've got no other choice. What's your excuse?" She leant back against the wall behind her and folded her round arms. "We visited a guy up near Willie, and we didn't like him much, so we thought we'd drive on a bit, but we weren't quite ready to go home. So, Burriga." As Ruthie said this, Dimple imagined her saying it about a beach town or a village in France. "I hope you enjoy your stay. Are you at the motel?" "No, just up the street at the pub. We thought the motel looked a little isolated." "I know what you mean, and you're right. It's like they're hoping no humans will turn up. The food at the pub is good, but you'll get the young cockies tonight, and that will probably ruin it for you." "Why's that?" Dimple asked, pretty sure he knew the answer. "Oh, they're nice enough kids, polite most of the time, and friendly, but they're so entitled. They drive these utes that cost more than my house, and if your farm isn't the size of Scotland, they think there's something wrong with you. They don't boast about lifestyle things like travel or houses or whatever, but if it's not big, they don't want anything to do with it. Big farms, big machinery, big turnover." "Don't worry, we're used to that," Ruthie said breezily, although they really weren't. In Freshwell? The woman asked, disbelieving. Yeah, sure, Dimple said. I don't think you get what I mean. She glared at them. There won't be a single child there whose family isn't worth $15 million. Not a single one. Most will be worth more, and some of them a lot more. Is that so? Ruthie said politely. I can see you don't believe me, but it's true, and I don't want to buy a news agency. I can tell you that for free. The woman left the counter and went back to doing whatever it was she had been doing. Ruthie and Dimple exited the shop and continued down the street. Do you think we'll meet someone who isn't opinionated on this trip? Ruthie asked with a straight face, looking at the empty street in front of her. Doesn't seem likely. Do you think our children are entitled? Probably, but I hope not. What would they be entitled to? Extremely good question. I'm thinking a kick up the bum if they're carrying on like that. There was an empty shop to the left. A sign that said Helena's Boutique was half torn away from the window. Inside, it looked like someone had taken the things that had some value and left everything else. Next door, there was an office of a stock and station agent that looked neat and well organised, and next to that was an accountant's office with windows too dark to see through. Ruthie put her hand in Dimple's, and he didn't shake it away like he normally would. It made Ruthie smile. I can't stop thinking about those Aboriginals on the river, and those that must have lived around our place. I always thought they just died because of the common cold or smallpox or something, but some of them had to have been hunted and shot. No one wrote that sort of thing down. For practical reasons, I guess. I've never thought about it either. Strange, isn't it? And convenient. We've deliberately ignored history. All of us. Together. We're all in on it. And I never even thought about it. It isn't good to know the country you love and work on was originally stolen from someone. I'm guessing they didn't have to pay the government much when they got hold of it either. You remember when you were at school and you read about totalitarian states fiddling around with history, erasing it or rewriting it, and you were so shocked? It was so hard to believe. Dimple nodded. After a few silent paces, Ruthie said, I need to think about something else. Let's see. I like the way they've kept the timber and corrugated iron awnings at the front of the shops. Except it gives it the look of a ghost town in a western, a town called Dry Gulch or something, with tumbleweeds blowing through the dusty main street. That's just silly. The place looks pretty. The trees they've put in on both sides, the little garden beds at the pedestrian crossing, the fresh paint on the shops that are still going. You're right. The main street seemed to go on forever, and they kept walking, wondering what might turn up next. Neither asked the other if they should keep going, or if there was something they particularly wanted to see. Eventually the houses thinned out, and a silo complex marked the end of the town. They turned back. Ruthie took out her phone and waved it around. I'm sure I've seen on Facebook that Jilly Ferner lives in Burriga. You remember her, don't you? I do. Her kids were the same age as ours. We got to know each other well back in those times. I thought I might give her a call, see if she wants to come and have a drink. Okay. What was her husband's name? Greg? Yeah, it was, Greg. Good bloke. Bit of a machinery whiz. Ruthie put the phone to her ear. Oh, hi, Jilly. It's Ruthie Travers. How are you? Dimple listened to their excited reconnection. There were things women did in relationships that he would never understand. The need to over-egg, the desperation to be nice, until they weren't. It was possible that women were nastier than men, except they didn't usually kill anybody. It was an argument loser. When you were as evil as some men were, everything else was insignificant. She's just at home, in town. She said she'd come down and say hello. Dimple checked his phone and said, Be time for a drink when we get back. We've timed it beautifully. I think she and Greg split. Someone said that, but I never heard for sure. Do you remember? No idea. They've been gone a long while. A truck came past, too large for the street, too fast for the road. Did you ever want to have an affair with anyone? Ruthie asked casually. You think Greg did? No. I was just wondering what you thought. That's kind of the most dangerous question, isn't it? Did you ever have an affair? No. I never even got close. There were women I thought were good sorts back when the kids were little and you were totally focused on them. Fantasized about them, I guess. Maybe in another world, if things were going wrong for us, I might have made a mistake. But not in this life. He said this with a dreamy pleasure, secure in the knowledge that he had nothing to confess. I kissed Peter Lohman behind the house at that huge Christmas party they had. You what? Kissed him. A real kiss. I wanted to. He didn't force me or anything. She didn't know why she had the need to tell him this. Jesus Christ! Dimple stopped in the middle of the pavement and looked at her. While I was in the party, you were kissing that self-important dickhead. And you never told me. Not until now. Sorry. She looked at him. His face looked like it might burst. Sorry? Fuck! It was just a kiss. Just. It's never just an anything. It's not what you did. It's the fact you did it. I'm still here, aren't I? Fucking hell. Makes me look like an idiot. My wife's at the back of the party having it away with another bloke and I'm off drinking with the boys. I would never have guessed. Couldn't imagine you were capable of that level of betrayal. Oh, Dimple, come on. I was young. I was lonely and I kissed a guy. Not good, but not the worst thing in the world. He looked at her carefully, and the fire went out of his indignation. I guess not. You never know. I might have been promiscuous if I'd known. Would you? He walked forward and she joined him, taking his hand again. No. I had to do it. You were so caught up in yourself and the farm and the big future you were working on. I felt like I didn't exist. I was ashamed afterwards, but it did the trick. I knew I existed after that. I'll punch him in the face next time I see him. For something that happened 20 years ago? Yes, and for making a fool of me. I don't imagine his wife ever kisses him. Too worried about her makeup or whatever. There's no need to be childish about it. Jeez, you play hard sometimes. You just told me you've been unfaithful, and now you're accusing me of being childish. I am. It was a small thing a long time ago. Nothing more ever came of it. Dimple was slapping his boots loudly on the concrete, as if he really were a disappointed child. Bullshit. After something like that with an attractive woman, most blokes would have a second crack. They couldn't resist, even if it was only when they were pissed. I bet he at least squeezed your bum at a party sometime. Did he? No. I was never alone with him again. I made sure of that. And he didn't pursue me. An older man, bent and pale, his hair thin, his skin empty of pigment, shuffled past in the opposite direction and smiled at them. "Don't give up on each other," he said in a weak voice. "You'll regret it." When the man was gone, they burst out laughing. "I'm not giving up on you," Dimple said when he'd collected himself. "Nor me on you." They passed the newsagent again, this time without noticing. "Well, if we're going to confess, I once wrote an email to Ellie Graham, years ago, before she was married, telling her she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. You were away and I was really drunk. As soon as I sent it, I panicked and tried to work out how I could get it back. In my state, I was sure there was a way. I spent half the night and couldn't figure out how to do it." Ellie? She was so pretty back then. In the morning, I rang her and apologised. She just laughed at me. Are you surprised? I remember you used to flirt with her. I wondered if you'd crossed the line. I never thought you'd write something down. I would have been very upset back then if I'd found out. And now? Intrigued, really, why you would reach out to someone like that, who would never have gone anywhere near you whether you were married or not. She might have. You said we flirted. You were nothing like her type. Look at her husband. Slim, tall, fastidious, and positively dapper. He's a control freak with a spreadsheet for everything. I don't see you in that frame. I could have been, but you made me messy. They had arrived at the front of the pub and its large timber and glass doors. Time for that drink, and no more confessions, Dimple said, pushing the door open for her. Are there more? She asked, tilting her head at him. Not from me, and I'm not listening to any from you. The main bar was still empty as Ruthie took a seat at a small round table in the dining section, which was an extension of the general bar area. The guy behind the bar remembered Dimple, poured the drinks quickly, and suggested they order early before the mob got hungry. Dimple and Ruthie sat in the quiet, appreciating the chance to have a drink and a meal without cooking or washing up, or having to think about all the things that needed doing in the morning. They chose meals from the plastic-coated menus and watched as the young people began to arrive. The noise level lifted slowly. There were more men than women in the crowd. At least there are girls, Dimple said, turning his chair so he could watch. It's always hard to get girls. Neither the girls nor the boys seem too up themselves, Ruthie said. Same as anywhere else, really. We can't really hear what they're talking about. They might be telling each other how terrifically wealthy they are and are going to be. I think Jay would fit in easily, and Finny too if he felt like it. Their meals were served, and they ate slowly without conversation. The noise from the bar crowd prevented it, and neither of them minded. Once the cancer enters the lymphatic system, it can, and usually does, spread to other areas of the body. A middle-aged woman came out of the crowd towards them. Ruthie noted that she walked with a confidence that Ruthie didn't remember the woman having. She'd lost weight, and appeared to have made more of an effort with her clothing, at least in this one example. She stood. Jilly! Ruthie, Dimple! She kissed them both on the cheek. Sorry I'm late. I got caught up and I'm supposed to be going out for dinner. I can only stay a minute, but I didn't want to miss you. And your meal's here. Please eat. Don't let me ruin it. The woman sat, and Dimple said, Let me get you a drink. No, I can get my own drink. You eat. It won't take me a sec. All right then. G&T, thanks. Dimple went to the bar, and the women began the process of catching up. Ruthie told her about the boys and their jobs, and how happy and well-adjusted they were. So, Finny's going okay? Yes, we had a tough time, but we're through that, and we're as strong as ever. You had an inkling, didn't you? I remember that. I did, but I didn't think I shared it with anyone. You didn't, but I remember the way you looked at him, as if there was something you couldn't quite work out. He would hate to hear that. He's adamant there's nothing out of the ordinary about him. I guess there isn't. Jilly told her about her 3 daughters, their impressive boyfriends and their extensive travels. They're the love of our lives, our kids, aren't they? Jilly observed. When Dimple returned, Ruthie asked, How's Greg? It seemed rude not to ask after him, no matter what had happened. He's good, I think, but I haven't seen him for a few months. Oh? Yeah, we couldn't go the distance. We spent a lot of time and energy trying to. For the kids, you know, and for us. I'm sorry to hear it. Don't be. It was for the best. We got out with a bit of cash at least. If we'd have hung on somehow until now, we would never have survived this drought. Would have lost everything. He made a cough that might have been a laugh. But we couldn't make the farm work. Too many hard years. always problems with money. It was tough, really tough. She paused, perhaps gauging whether she should go on. Anyway, we blamed each other for everything and fought until we couldn't even be in the same room. So, we sold the farm and gave each other a chance. He's in the city now, believe it or not. I think he's happy. I'd like him to be happy. We're sort of friends these days." Jilly took in a big breath and looked up at them with an expression that asked forgiveness for offering such a lump of bad news and emotions so easily. "That sounds rough. You seem okay, though." Jilly sat up straight and smiled. "Oh, but I am. Actually, I cannot believe how happy I am. I have lots of friends. I own a nice little place in Barraga, but I spend plenty of time in the city. I've got a thriving handmade jewellery business, most of it online, but I do a lot of presentations to city women, and the freedom. My God, the freedom. No one to look after, come and go as I please, spend time on the things that interest me." Ruthie believed her. It did not look like an act put on specially to convince old friends or herself, and there was something about Jilly that she couldn't quite describe. Vivaciousness? Maybe. Pleased with herself, more accurately, but in a good way. Ruthie had friends who were gradually sinking back into the comfort of being mum, the go-to person for love and support, who chose their language and their clothes to fit in with that role. The pleasures of grandparenting beckoned. Jilly was not that kind of person. She looked ready for any challenge, any experience. Ruthie felt jealousy, like an enemy in the base of her stomach. "We might have some trouble getting to sleep," Dimple said, nodding towards the crowd when he'd finished eating. "Because we're fuddy-duddies." Ruthie dabbed her mouth with a paper serviette. "Only a fuddy-duddy would even know that expression. What's it like to live in Barraga, Jilly?" "It's nice. It's quiet and people don't bother me. I get to do all the interesting things in the city and see my friends, and then I come home for some peace and bury myself in doing my orders." "You make the jewellery?" Ruthie wondered when Jilly had become creative. "I do. I use polished stones that I find around here as the centrepiece, and then I set them in silver. But I get a bit of help with that sometimes." "Wow," Ruthie said. "I am so impressed." And she was. They talked a while longer. Jilly asked them what had brought them to Barraga and inquired about mutual friends. Then she checked her phone and got up abruptly to leave. "So good to see you both, but now I'm really late, and if I don't go, I'll be in huge trouble." She kissed them and walked away smartly, offering a last flicking wave. "Nice to see her in such good form," Ruthie said to the back of the disappearing figure. "She's looking good, isn't she?" "Yes, but she's different." Dimple looked to where Jilly had disappeared, aware that he had probably missed something. "So full of life, or something. Didn't you think?" Ruthie peered across at him. "I guess so. The result of being single." "That, and losing the burden of the farm. And it must be exhausting fighting in a marriage all the time." "She'd be lonely, though, living in Barraga on her own. The nights would be pretty quiet, I reckon." "She doesn't sound lonely." "You want another drink?" "Please. After that, I think I'll go upstairs and read my book." Leaning on the bar, Dimple could just hear the TV that was anchored high on the wall. A politician was complaining that the government had done nothing about corruption in a water-sharing plan, despite many reported instances. He focused on the group of young people at the other end of the bar. They looked like there was nothing in the world that was worth worrying about. He knew all young people in groups could look like that. But these were in the middle of nowhere in a record-breaking drought, faced by a future that might be like nothing anyone had ever seen. It was wasted on the young. "Good to blow off steam," he said to the barman, who was walking quickly towards him after getting a break in the orders from the other end. "Yeah, same again." "Sure. Nice group?" The barman shrugged. "Rich kids, you know?" "No, I don't." "Well, They're nice until it doesn't suit them. He put the drinks on the bar and took Dimple's credit card. They get nasty? Nah, they just do what they want, whether you like it or not. But they always pay for the damage they cause. Someone picks up the tab for them. He returned the card. Thanks. Won't be any trouble tonight, though. They'll finish up early, because they're all flat out sowing their irrigated country. The barman strode back to the drinkers who were hanging over the bar waiting to be served. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten I was here, she said as he put her drink on the table. He's too busy trying to keep up with that lot. Finny says have a beer for him. Ruthie waved her phone at him. Cheers, Finny. He lifted the beer glass to his lips and took a long, self-satisfied drink. Do you remember him as a baby? He was so long. I thought he was going to end up 2 meters tall. Dimple just smiled at her and let her enjoy her recollection. It wasn't something she normally indulged in. In fact, he knew she disliked reminiscing and indulging in nostalgia. She thought they were dopey practices that glorified the less than glorious. They lay side by side in the bed, Ruthie with her glasses on, supported by extra pillows she'd found in the cupboard. Dimple sat with his head against the hard headboard, his eyes shut. You're not going to die, you know. Not in the near future, anyway. I know. So why all the memories and confessions? She put the book down and took off her glasses. You know what you said about don't I ever get sick of being a good woman? I don't know what a good woman is, but I might be sick of it. The prognosis has made me think about the future. I've decided I need to make sure I'm in the right place with the right person. She gulped, unaware her explanation would bring up such emotion. It dawned on me that I need to be where I really want to be, doing what I really want to do. I know it sounds spoilt, but I've been telling myself if I want to live a different life, even if it's that silly coffee and friends life in town, then I'd better go and find it. I was kidding about that. I'm not. She closed her eyes and put her hand over her mouth. She took the hand away and said, I'm worried about what's going to happen. To me. To you. To our lives. That's understandable. Don't patronize me, please. I love you, and I think you love me. But sometimes I'm not convinced you need me. Where did this come from? I definitely need you. Never a question. I know it's a very difficult time, but you've always been so content on the farm. I've never heard you say you wanted to be anywhere else. Not for any length of time, anyway. You love your garden, the animals, the look of our place, the community, our friends. Now suddenly you sound like you want to leave it all behind. You've got the farm and your mates. You'd survive just fine if I left. He turned on his side to her and suddenly realized that her reason for insisting on this trip might have been simply to allow herself room to say goodbye to him. No. I need you. I really need you. Come on, Dimple. Let's not gild this. We're good friends. We've battled through a lot together, survived a lot. We've got history. That doesn't mean we have to have a future. We might live another 30 years. What if there's more out there for both of us? He could feel himself shaking. He had never thought about this. He understood the practical possibility, but was incapable of thinking it genuine. I understand what you're saying, but I think you've got it the wrong way around. This is the good time, the payoff of, companionship, partnership, love. Makes it sound like we're already in the nursing home. It's a pretty limp version of living, isn't it? I just feel like I've been given a gift and all I've done is open it. He was telling himself that this was just a momentary panic that would pass once she had the treatment. But he didn't believe himself. So you want to go skydiving, camping in the Red Centre, taking lovers? Maybe. Oh. He lay on his back and looked up at the beige ceiling. She was asking for things he couldn't provide. She could take her share of the farm and do what she wanted to do, but it wouldn't include him. A couple of decades together gone. Just like that? He clicked his fingers. She put a hand on his shoulder. Probably not, but there's got to be something better than just getting through. He had used the phrase himself over dinner with Ruthie, or out with friends, charged up by too many drinks. But he had never meant it. He didn't know he had not meant it until now. When Ruthie said things like this, she turned abstract flights of fancy into real, scary things. Before now, he would have refused to take her seriously, hugged her, and told her to stop going on about nothing. Not now. Was she really going to leave him? He refused to believe it. What else could he do? If there was another man, he might have been able to confront him, warn him off or something before it was too late. But if Ruthie was leaving him, she was doing it for an idea, a possible life, possible men. Women did that. Of all the men he knew and had heard of who'd split with their wives, almost all of them had been having an affair of some sort. There was always someone else, even if they weren't the cause of the breakdown. The men in his world traded one relationship for another. Women did not. Ruthie continued, "It's like you said before. What if we have another drought like this in, say, 3 years, and another one 3 years after that? Do you want to live like that? There are people, experts, who say we might be in the process of destroying the planet. There's no turning back." I thought you were skeptical about those people. I was. I'm not so sure now. When I look around, I can't see any goodness. Not in the climate, or the people, or the politicians, or our systems. When did this happen to you? I don't know. I don't feel it all the time, but sometimes I think this is the end of everything good. We've brought our sons into an awful world, so I think I must seek out the best I can. You mean we have to sell the farm? It's the only way to avoid drought as well as finance the way you want to live. I'm not insisting on anything. I'm just thinking about the future because I can't put off thinking about it anymore. We can't. The sound of the party in the bar rose up and drifted in through their open window. What about me? I don't know. It's a work in progress, I guess. I think I'll get some sleep. Dimple clicked his bedside light off, then rolled over and pulled the blankets to cover himself. He wasn't going to sleep, and guessed Ruthie knew that. But he wasn't ready to hear more bad news. He had always been aware that while she had chosen to come with him to this life, it was still his life. Even as he had joked about it, he had known she'd done her time and now deserved a little more. But how to provide it without ruining his own life? She was crying now, her sobs stifled to small intakes of breath. He turned back and placed his arms around her, and she pushed her wet face onto his shoulder. "Just give it the 48 hours, he said. "Let's not think about anything until then." He could feel her nodding against him. "I don't want to leave you, but I'm afraid of not being alive." He gave her a squeeze, and she sniffed and sat up. "God, I'm pathetic. Talking about being brave and living life to the full, but being pathetic." She got up. "I'm going to go to the bathroom." She went out the door and left Dimple wondering if the top of his head might blow off with all the stuff he'd been given to think about today. In the morning, they were awake early, as always, with first light finding its way through their lone window. Dimple got up and padded his way down to the toilets. There was no one else around. When he got back to the room, Ruthie was sitting up in bed, the sheet wrapped around her, her shoulders bare, and her smile suggestive. "Well," he said, "you certainly keep me guessing," and got into bed with her. Chapter 6. As they walked down the stairs to breakfast, she was humming in the way she reserved for her best days in the garden. She knew Dimple would not know what to make of it, but she had decided in her sleep to be impulsive. If she felt good enough to hum, she would hum. "Let's find a coffee shop," she said almost gaily when they reached the ground floor. "Borough would have a reasonable coffee shop, wouldn't it?" These days everywhere has a reasonable coffee shop. He had expected she might be morose this morning after the night's conversation. He was obviously mistaken. She took his hand and led him out the door. It was another perfect blue sky day, not hot, and the breeze was light. They walked in the opposite direction to the one they had the day before, and within a block found 2 coffee shops that were just opening. "This one," said Ruthie, choosing the smaller of the 2. They sat outside under an umbrella not far from the road. In a big town, it would have been a terrible choice. In Borough, to Ruthie, it felt kind of convivial. The few cars going past added interest and some energy. Dimple ordered fried eggs and bacon, like they might at home. Ruthie tried to find something strange on the menu to signify she was being impulsive and ready to throw away the old rules and try anything. But then she realised she was doing it for the sake of it, and that was being fake. So she elected to have the same as Dimple, with sourdough, which seemed funny and out of place. Even though the eggs and bacon weren't as skillfully cooked as they would have been at home, they tasted really good, without the weight of responsibility, she thought. Dimple had hardly spoken. Now he had a city newspaper to read, a real one, and was intent on privately enjoying an experience that mostly didn't exist anymore. She liked that. It felt like so many good things were disappearing. It was important to savour them as they slipped through your fingers. And Dimple might even have thought that about her. As she watched him, engrossed in an article, his ill-fitting reading glasses sitting slightly lopsided on his head, she wondered if she could ever leave him. It would come with so much pain, and maybe some relief, and even opportunity. How brave would you have to be? And did you ever really leave someone you had spent more than 2 decades with? Even if you moved overseas, they would still be with you in so many ways. And what would it be like to have sex with someone else? She couldn't remember the few encounters she'd had before she took up with Dimple. The details, anyway. She could recall the boys and the men and the sorts of things they'd done together. But the intricacies of the act, how passionate, how good, how big, were a blur. Maybe biology did that to your memory as a protective measure. It served no purpose to be remembering how good an ex was in the bedroom. Now she could hear him swallowing, breathing. Those noises got louder as you got older. She could live without the noises. How much could you really know another human being? It was a tiresome question, but suddenly pertinent, wasn't it? She knew him so well, but not completely. She didn't know he could write a love letter to Ellie. He had never written her one, nor written anything else much except business letters and an occasional speech. But she knew he was capable of inebriated flights of fancy to a childish level, so his confession wasn't a shock. And there were male rules and insecurities that guided him and prevented him from doing things which she would never understand. He hated to show weakness, of course, but he fought against showing it, even in things he was obviously weak at. He didn't like to look soft, except when men in general thought it was okay to be soft. The death of a child, a crisis in the career of a significant sportsman, the loss of a good dog. She didn't care to understand these things, but acknowledging that he held them tight was part of understanding her husband. It meant there were things about him she would never know. Not big things, but secrets all the same. And things that were big enough, such as, did he care more about her or the farm? When it really came down to it, would he rather have her or the place he loved so much? At this age and stage, she didn't begrudge him loving the farm. It was important to know what mattered. She would like to know what he would put first. If they both lived on, she would be around long after the farm was no longer part of their everyday. Her problem was that she loved the boys first and foremost, but they had better things to do than put her first. After them, there was Dimple, her friends, the farm, and the animals, and she wasn't sure where they aligned in the hierarchy. She was no better than he was. Except she loved him, and her childhood friend Isla, who had never married but wanted to, and was always surprised when she heard that a mature couple had separated. Why? She would ask Ruthie. Do they think it's that good on your own? All nightclubs and buff Italian men, serious-minded afternoon theatre with all the other grey-haired ladies, watching the TV programs you want to watch? It gets old very quickly, as we do. Stick with whoever you're with, I say. Isla was most likely right. But didn't you have to appreciate every day of good health you had? Very often, the first area that a cancer spreads to is the lymph nodes in the underarm area. Ruthie asked the young woman serving them for another coffee, which seemed the height of indulgence. But when she asked Dimple if he wanted another too, he shook his head impatiently. Being with someone else was something she had thought so little about. When she fantasized, it normally didn't include sex. She dreamed of exquisite dinners, exotic places, and riding horses in a gallop with unknown men through endless stands of pine trees. Sometimes Dimple was nearby watching, or just there for protection if she needed it. She presumed her imagination was constrained by her age and her stage. Young women probably fantasized about sex and different partners, and had as many affairs as the men did. But she knew of middle-aged women who had found a new partner and rediscovered desire. It was an exciting thought, even if somehow unfair. Not that she denied Dimple very often, but she knew he always wished for more. Men just did, and there was nothing she could do about that fact. But now, in the broad main street of Burriga, as her second coffee arrived, and a ute with pig dogs in a cage on the back parked a few spaces down from her, she could feel a flush around her cheeks and her neck. Typical, Dimple would have said if he knew. Typical that she would be horny in the most unlikely place, where gaining satisfaction was impractical. She took a deep breath and decided to keep it to herself and not examine what it might mean. Another thing to not think about for one more day. Because thinking about the possibility that a kind of gilded cage had been dismantled would ruin the time she had with Dimple. Do you think we could stay another night somewhere? He put his paper down flat on his lap and looked over his glasses at her as if he were deliberately imitating the cliché. Sure. Where will we go? Maybe somewhere with a dam? Or with a mountain? Well, that narrows it down. He smiled in a pleasant, uncomplicated way. Isn't Willow Dam southeast of here? Wouldn't be much of a detour. He took out his phone and tapped on it. It's an hour out of our way. He tapped again. There are cabins there to stay at. Not far from the water either. He stretched out an arm and offered his phone, which held a photo of the cabins. Seems fine. He took the phone and looked pleased. Right then, the day's organised. He picked his paper up again, gave it a little shake to straighten it, and went back to reading. His movements were as familiar to her as were the movements of her boys. The way he walked heavily with his chest slightly out. His habit of patting his hair when he thought a comment was too personal. The ritual of smacking his lips after something sweet. The look downwards to his right when he was thinking about something. The swearing under his breath when someone, including himself, disappointed him. She would be surprised if he knew her movements that well. He couldn't have missed seeing them, but his brain probably didn't record that sort of thing. He was a man, she reminded herself, who could murder a tube of toothpaste. She might have wasted a year of her life if she added up all the time she'd spent getting toothpaste tubes back into shape. Toothpaste had to be squeezed from the bottom up, so the tube was always flat at the empty end and full at the cap end. It was simply civilization, she'd told him. But he pretended he always squeezed from the base, so he didn't know what she was going on about. He wasn't much of a snorer, at least. She had to give him that. So many of her friends' husbands snored at a volume that would scare children. She knew that from the times they had been away camping in groups and staying in other odd places. She had often talked with her friends about the future, about what they might be missing, what they weren't brave enough to reach out for. But it had only ever been a half-drunk game of fantasy. Her friends were very sensible, reliable people. They took their responsibilities, their children, their parents, their husbands, their farm businesses, their communities, their animals, very seriously. They were not the sort of people to leave those things behind. She liked them because of it, but their sense of responsibility was a silly notion. If anyone had a right to say enough, it was her friends. She wondered if she could possibly be the person to show them how. Dimple looked past his newspaper at his wife. She was looking into the street, deep in thought, which resulted in small smiles lightening her face. He hoped she wasn't thinking about new lovers. That was a real turn-up for the books. How long had she been thinking about other men? Since she'd kissed that fuckwit Loman? No. Sex was never uppermost in her mind, and last night was clear proof that she wasn't giving too much thought to other guys. Or was she? While they were doing it? That was a topic he was certainly not delving into. He was pleased she wanted to stay another day. He was enjoying being with her, on holiday with her, because that's what it was. No matter how it had started out, looking at her this morning, smiling to herself after last night, after yesterday, she was a magic woman. He was feeling like a teenager losing his first girlfriend, and knowing it was confirmation that she had never been his, and was way too good for him. "Oh, for fuck's sake," he said under his breath, causing Ruthie to direct a bent eyebrow at him, which he ignored, making out that something in an article he was reading had annoyed him. He had been with this woman so long, he couldn't remember half of it. She had a right to feel unsettled and nervous about the future, and it was his job to stand by her, not moon about like a reality TV romance contestant. But was she unsettled? Or was this a crisis? It felt close to a crisis, but he knew a week could be a long time in a marriage. Sometimes you just had to hang on until things improved, even when you were almost certain they wouldn't. It was comforting to have a newspaper. There was nothing in it worth reading anymore, but at this moment it was good to have the feel and the protection of it. He remembered how amazing she'd been over Finney, how she'd known from the earliest days, or at least known there was something different about him. She had had so little prejudice about it. She hardly ever put her understanding into words. Dimple would not have known until the minute Finney announced it if Ruthie hadn't guided him towards accepting the possibility. Jay was the sensitive one, the caring one. If Dimple was going to suspect that one of his boys was gay, it would have been Jay. and then it took Dimple a long time to accept the fact of Finney's homosexuality. He had prided himself on being broad-minded about these sorts of things, more so than his mates. But gay men didn't stay in the country for long, even now, so it was easy to keep it in the abstract. There was nothing abstract about Finney and Finney's boyfriends, though. When his son came out, Dimple was able to say all the right words and smile to show that, like Ruthie, he had just been waiting for Finney to share it with them. But really, he hadn't been waiting at all. He had almost been praying that Ruthie was wrong. When he had let slip that he was still feeling that way, it was the one time Ruthie really went for him. She had accepted that he would take time to accept who his son was, but she would not tolerate him wishing Finney was something he wasn't. Finney was big and strong and beautiful. He was tough and physically gifted. Dimple loved to watch him play football. He had the kind of talent that Dimple wished he had had when he was a young man. And he was modest. People loved him. Still did. There were girls too, of course, for a long time, but Ruthie never paid much attention to them. She was nice and enjoyed a laugh with them, but they never got the focus that Jay's girlfriends did. Dimple wondered if she was a bit ashamed that Finney's girlfriends were being duped or something, or whether she knew they could never matter that much to Finney. It was the sort of thing that no one else would have noticed, not even Finney's girlfriends. Of course Jay noticed, and had once mentioned it to Dimple, knowingly, as if he was giving Dimple a heads up on something. At the time, Dimple declined to take note. Finney had been unable to talk about it with his father, and Dimple knew that was only partly Finney's fault. His elder son knew his father well enough to know he wouldn't handle it very well. They had spent a lot of time together, just the two of them, on football trips and athletics camps. Though they had talked about everything and shared it all, Dimple had never asked about that. It was shameful, a feeling that was still with him. If he'd had the courage or the fortitude to toss the topic around a bit, he was sure he would have saved Finney and himself a lot of pain, and they wouldn't have had to go through those 2 years of coolness. 2 years when they were still friendly and in contact, and ostensibly everything was fine. But Dimple was only halfway down the track to acceptance, and Finney knew it. Ruthie never intervened. "I just tell him that you love him," she'd said. "You two have to work the rest of it out for yourselves." She was right. If Dimple wasn't genuine, he couldn't be forced into it. He had to find his own way there. Or not. Finney would understand his father's reluctance, but Dimple knew he was in danger of losing him. No one wanted to spend time with people who judged them. There were plenty of other places to be, and good people to be with. It had taken a couple of years for him to get back to it being easy between himself and Finney. A tall man in a soft hat walked past them and stopped, turned back, looked at Dimple and said, "Dimple Travers, how are you, mate?" The man directed a large hand on the end of a long arm at Dimple. Dimple half got up, took the hand and said with a grin, "Mal bloody Wilson." They shook hands vigorously, beaming. "I haven't seen you forever," Mal said, pushing his hat back. 10 years? Probably. You remember Ruthie? He pointed at his wife, and Mal said, "Yes," and stuck the hand out at her. She took it, felt small in its grip, and said, "Sit down, please." Mal took off his hat, put it on the table, and pulled out a seat. "What the hell are you doing in Burriga?" he asked. "Just travelling through. Decided to stop off. Only cattle feeding to go home to." Mal lost his wide smile. "Yeah, know what you mean. Not good. But good for me, though, because otherwise I wouldn't have bumped into you." "Do you want a coffee or something?" Ruthie pointed at her own. "No, thanks. I'm on my way to a meeting." He checked his watch. "How's Kirsty?" Dimple said. "Kirsty is really well. We live in the city now. So she's close to her family and a lot of old friends. That makes her happy. You're in the city? Dimple asked. Yeah, we sold the machinery dealership in the last drought. It was starting to go backwards and we didn't have the capital to stay with the big boys, so we got out. I've got a little drone business now. He nodded his head in recognition of the unlikely nature of everything. They're getting to be a big deal out here. Checking water, pumps, aerial surveillance of huge paddocks. It's going well. It's a national business, and most of the time I've got to go to my clients rather than then come to me. So, Kirsty suggested a move to the city, and I agreed. You guys are obviously still on the ranch? Yes, Dimple and Ruthie said at once. Are you up here buying more country? No, we, heard Wally Oliver on the radio talking about getting rid of the poorer farmers, and we went to give him a piece of our minds. We're on our way home. Seriously? Wow, you too. I'm impressed. He gave one clap. I bet I know how it went. He would have tried to charm you, invited you into his massive home, served you drinks or whatever, asked you reasonable questions. So you start to think he mightn't be such a bad guy, someone who's open to ideas, and maybe your original assessment was wrong. Dimple and Ruthie nodded, realising that what they had thought was a unique experience was actually commonplace. They both felt slightly cheated. Problem is, he's a sociopath. It's all a weird act. He likes to feel like he's a statesman or something. He wouldn't have listened to a word you said. He'd just as easily knock your head off and kick you down the stairs. Dimple and Ruthie looked at each other. Ruthie said, Sounds like you've had dealings with him. A few. He's a very big player. If you're in business out here, you can't really avoid him. One time he thought my drones were spying on him, and we had a fair bit of negotiation over that. Scary bloke. He shot at some journalists last year. Over their heads, I guess, but still. I wouldn't suggest going back for a second helping. He might show his other side this time. Were you spying on him? No, we don't do that stuff. He'd shoot them out of the sky anyway. It can be like the Wild West out here. I have to deal with people like him, though, because they're the only ones with money. He said the politicians would do whatever he wanted, especially over water. Mal shrugged and rolled his eyes. Not just him. No one challenges the big water users. There's a bit of a stink, and then it blows over. I always used to think corruption at the top was rare, a bad egg once in a blue moon. I was wrong. Out here, the money going places it shouldn't is mind-boggling. Certain politicians, bureaucrats and big operators all working the system together. Eventually they'll fuck everything, but they will have made their money to look after themselves. Dimple and Ruthie shook their heads, dismayed. Mal sat back and scratched his head. God, I'm serious, aren't I? Sorry, we should be laughing and joking, sharing old times, not listening to me carry on about my load. How are things for you two? Between them, they did their best to describe a happy life, where things had been tough, but not so tough they couldn't handle them, with two well-adjusted sons they were proud of. To Dimple, it felt like cheating to paint such a rosy picture. But he was part of a team with Ruthie, and the team said you had to put your best foot forward. Mal picked up his hat, spun it in his hands, and said, I really must be going. I was on my way to an appointment when I saw you, and now I'm late. He stood up, and they remembered he was tall and impressive. So nice to see you two. I'd say we should try to catch up again somewhere, but that seems unlikely. Anyway, all the best. He shook Dimple's hand and bent to kiss Ruthie. They watched him walk away, sad that they couldn't have more time with him. Nice guy, Dimple said, bobbing his head to agree with himself. Nice man, Ruthie agreed. Should we hang around and see if he wants to have dinner or something? I wouldn't know how to find him. He didn't say where his meeting was, did he? No. Pity. It might have been fun. Do you want to hit the road? Let's go to the dam. They packed up their things and carried them back down the staircase to their car. Dimple gave the room keys to the barman, and they pulled out onto the wide, empty street, feeling like it was a new day on a different planet. On the edge of town, Ruthie said, "It just occurred to me that the cabins at the lake probably won't have any food or drink or whatever. I imagine we've got to take everything we need." Dimple turned around and took them back to the small supermarket he'd noticed on the way out. The car park was only half full, and the supermarket less so. They bought meat, vegetables and some things for breakfast, as well as grog and some water. Even Dimple noticed the prices were all much higher than they were used to. "Only one supermarket in town," he said, looking at the beer prices. "They can charge what they want, I guess." They bought ice for the esky and packed in as much as they could of what they had bought on top of it. "I hope they're powered cabins," Ruthie said. "Otherwise your beer is going to be warm." "I'm pretty sure the website said they were." The road to the dam took them away from the plain and into undulating country. It was still dry, but there were trees and sometimes greenness in the bottom of the gullies. "I hate the way you don't squeeze the toothpaste from the bottom," Ruthie said, as if it were a revelation. "I know, but I can't stand it when you never shut cupboard doors and you leave forks in the knife tray. You walk in the house with boots on when I'm not around. You leave hoses on in the garden overnight and pretend it's a mistake. You never remember what I say, and you never cook. You refuse to understand how the TV remotes work. It's a nightmare just watching you in action, and you hate it when I cook. You can't pick up after yourself, and you never clean the toilet properly. It's like living with a 15-year-old. No matter how many jobs I do around the garden or in the house, you've always got another long list for me to do. I could work full-time in the house and garden, and you'd still be insinuating nothing gets done around here. Your feet are too big." His laughter exploded. "That's the best insult I've ever had. And for the record, I like everything about your body." "Ooh, smarmy is even worse than nasty." "Not smarmy, just the truth." The truth. Wally said he was telling the truth. I'm not sure the truth is all it's cracked up to be. A sign read, "Welcome to Langen. Population 1,500. "This looks nice. Can we stop here for a bit?" Dimple found a place next to a white post that held up an awning in the main street. The buildings were old and somehow stately, and the street was winding and narrow, making it feel historical. They got out and crossed the road. A sign on a brick building read, "Historic Langen Inn, established 1865. It didn't seem terribly historic to Ruthie, but small towns had to grab at what they could. 1865, Dimple repeated, pulling his pants up just a little bit. Ned Kelly was already 10 years old. Not exactly first settlement stuff, is it? "You're a Ned Kelly buff," Ruthie said, suspecting a trick. "No, I just remember his birth date. June 1855. I don't know why. Can't remember the boys' birthdays half the time." Ruthie tapped into her phone. "Says December 1854 here." "What? You sure?" "Yep." Another says June 1855 and adds that no one is really sure of the actual date. There goes my credibility for the day. Dimple's phone rang and he answered it. "Wally?" "I'm all right. What can I do for you?" He looked at Ruthie, his eyes wide, eyebrows lifted, covered the phone and mouthed, "Wally Oliver," dramatically. "No, we're not home yet. Just taking our time." "Well, it's important to stand up for what you think is right. We don't think you're right." Ruthie grinned and pulled a clownish face. "You want to buy our place?" Dimple listened, his face now showing confusion. "It's not for sale. I don't think you quite understood us. We're battling, but we're not going to the wall. We didn't come to defend our own case. We came on behalf of the farmers who are at the end of their tethers. That's not us." Ruthie could see Dimple was insulted and starting to be very annoyed. "I don't want your money. I don't care if you're prepared to pay double market value. It's not for sale. Goodbye." Dimple squeezed his phone and gritted his teeth. What the fuck was that all about? Says he wants to buy our farm. Scotty told him it was in good order and well run. How Scotty would know, I've no idea. Offers me double whatever the local agents say is market value. Hasn't even seen the place. Wouldn't even know the district. The man's a fucking lunatic. Why would he want to buy it? I haven't got a clue. They walked up a slight incline towards what looked like the centre of town. Every car space was taken. Banners fluttered from the street light posts. A market day was taking place in a small park next to the street. "Double the value?" Ruthie asked, pretending she hadn't properly heard. "Maybe we should consider it." "Are you for real? This is the guy we just travelled halfway across the state to give a piece of our mind to. He's one step off being the devil. It's tainted money. But who can afford to go past something like that? I bet it's not even a real offer. He'd probably pull out at the last minute or never pay. It's just a way of letting us know how insignificant we are. As far as he's concerned, everybody is a small farmer except him, and he can buy and sell us with his spare change. I think he's trying to prove his point. You and your type will disappear. He's going to disappear us. Doesn't mean we shouldn't take the offer seriously." Dimple looked at his wife. It was impossible to keep up with her. She had been so beautifully, righteously angry at Wally. And now? "You don't think he's one of the bad guys?" "He certainly is. But if he pays double, we'd be able to get out and buy a better property than our own, if you wanted to. The drought will mean plenty of willing sellers." They stopped at the edge of the market. There were pop-up tents set up in a square around a patch of green grass. There were earrings, women's clothes, handmade toys, pottery, and a couple of food stalls. The atmosphere was light-hearted and happy. "Let me get this right. Are you suggesting we take advantage of the people we just defended?" "We defended their right to dignity, to not be cheered on in their downfall, but we can't save them. Wally's offer would mean we could pay above their reserve. Or you could pay me out and still have enough to buy a good place." The conversation had shifted, and Dimple knew he was being outplayed. She was so much further down the road on this stuff than he was. He turned and put his hands on her shoulders. "Ruthie, you're serious about leaving me, aren't you?" "No, I won't leave while this drought is on. But after that, I'm not certain I'm staying either, so it's just practical to keep the possibility of a sale in the mix."
End of CD 3.